short story phase. Grab your hammer so we can clear a path through the chaos and forge our own narratives in the Age of Sigmar. Your allies through the realm gates this episode are...
I'm Davy, and I just woke up in the pitch black, and I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be doing here.
That's any different. And I'm Aaron. No beauties here, just a beast and a beast. And today, we're going to talk about Beasts, The Road of the Hollow King by John French. But before we do... Hey, Davey. Not guys. You're just one guy. But you know, your presence is so full that it feels like you're more than one person. This is dumb. This is definitely getting cut out. Davey, how are you doing today in the blackness?
Both of me are doing great. All of me are doing great.
No, I can't cut it.
I know what I'm doing. I know exactly what I'm doing. Yeah. No, I'm doing great. This is... We kind of agreed on reading this. The nice thing about these pocket realms is if I have forgotten to read it, then the night before I can just read it. So
it's been so long since we've had one that I haven't previously read. And yet, so that means I have to reread it every single time. So think of all the short stories I'm not getting a chance to read because I got to read these ones twice. Ugh.
Oh, man. Yeah.
What a life I lead.
Minutes upon minutes used up.
They're so short. I mean, they're shorter than most novel chapters. So like
yeah.
I love these things.
Yeah.
Right on. Glad to hear it. So like I said, we're going to talk about Beasts in a hot second. But before we do, we got to get through what we've been up to. And I will say in the hobby, quote unquote, in the hobby. Hey, Davey, what was the last hobby that you did or games that you played, or book that you read, or maybe all the above?
Well, our last significant hobby on the what the heck side was we had a beginner and returning player friendly in-town tournament, Rivals Plus. I think the previous event we had in town was somewhere in the 7 or 8 range, and we were really hoping to improve on that based on people met and hands shook at Adepticon. We ended up with 16. That was pretty awesome.
Nice, so, right on.
Yeah, it felt real good. Kind of scooped up another local player, I think. Maybe more than a couple, and enthused some that were just kind of dabbling. And then we got some folks from out of town that I think are going to be returning. So all around, really cool.
What did you get a sense of what proportion of like new players versus like the opposite of new players was? What was the division was?
Well, it's a little tricky we had at least one almost completely brand new player, and then several that had not played in 2 or 3 years, and then a couple more that have been only playing for several weeks. So if I split it into the people who are, all in already and the people who are either new or returning, maybe you would consider them additions to the community if they became regular players. I'd say we're like a 60-40 split, which we're pretty stoked about. Maybe even as far as half and half. Certainly if you had talked to us like a month ago, which makes sense because we doubled, right? So.
Yeah, true. And it sounds like that in some small part, that was a little bit of the goal, what you're trying to do, right? Making it new player friendly. So.
Yep, that's exactly what we're trying to do. So, yeah, it was cool. As far as reading, I like to, we do a lot of talking about this. I think I usually try to highlight something non-hobby related, something sort of in between. This is a narrative podcast, and not a podcast that talks about narrative, but like a fiction podcast, Old Gods of Appalachia. And it is a horror anthology set in the Appalachian Mountains. So it's really well produced, really cool. And it's been going on for a couple years. I just started checking it out. So I think it's really well made, and a really fun listen. So if that sounds like your sort of thing, you should go check it out. Is it an audio drama or like an audio book kind of? And I know the distinction is a little foggy, but. That's a good point. Somewhere in between, like there's more sound effects. Like they'll have some sound effects in the back and like some cool. So it's not just strict reading, I guess. But it is not quite as bombastic as some audio dramas I've heard. So only the faithful. That's what I was saying without saying. So wow. Yeah. Battle sounds. Right. Yeah. Very cool. Right on. Anything else you want to highlight? No. What about you? What you been hobbying or reading? Hobby. So I've taken a break from the Daughters, which is weird because the Daughters book is imminent. But I've been putting together the Dark Oath Savagers because it occurred to me that I have got a whole bunch of Slaves to Darkness, not a whole bunch, a handful of Slave to Darkness stuff, but these guys weren't assembled, and it was like this hole in the collection that I needed to finish. And so, gotta drop what you're doing, you gotta fill it out. So I've just been assembling those guys, trying to figure out, asking what
what the best loadouts are, as if that has any bearing on anything that I do in my life. And yet I gotta know, I gotta ask. So I've been assembling those dudes. As far as games, last game that I played was Adepticon. Though have we done one of these since Adepticon? So like maybe it's still pertinent in that I played those few games of Underworld. So we'll look back to that great event where the last games that I played. And then book that I read. So I don't know if we've had have I brought this up on the Pocket Realms yet, but we've been doing Mortal Realms book club in the Mortal Realms Discord, which can be found at www.themortalrealms.com/discord. For a while there, I'm trying to think what even the logic is behind why I started doing it. Because we do novels for the show for the story phase, obviously, but I don't know, maybe I felt there was a way to like get more of them or get more people involved, right? The book club's great because you can have a lot of perspectives, or at least some of the, the book clubs that we're in, Davy, outside of the hobby. Like it's not just 3 or 4 people, but it can 6, 7, or 8. The numbers can get large, and so I wanted to get more of that experience a little bit, or take what I've learned from that outside the hobby book club and introduce it into more of an Age of Sigmar setting. Yeah. Excuse me. So I'm like, hey, you know what? I'll bring in the folks in the Discord and get them chatting about these books. Plus, over a series of months, there was like one book after the other book after the other. So there's a bunch of novels coming out.
Sure. And we've talked some in the past about maybe having story phase look a little bit like that, Yeah. Exactly. But it was hard to figure out, 2 things, hard to figure out how to make that happen. And the second, once there's momentum on a particular way a show is done, man, it is hard to adjust that in any way at all. So
it's easier to not do it at all than to like change it, which is kind of what we've been doing lately, which is not to say we won't get back to it. But
so I haven't participated, but I am super glad to see that it's there and think of a situation where I might be able to do that at some point.
Well, and furthermore, some of our community members are infinitely more insightful than I am, and so I'd much rather listen to them talk about the thing than have to come up with any original ideas my own. So unlike this, and literally unlike what we're doing right now. So in doing so, I'd highlight that we read Gothcall Hollow a few months ago. We read Kragnos, what would have been 2 months ago, and then they just read Hallowed Ground, which I didn't get a chance to read. What I really want to, by Richard. Nope, Aaron, don't say his name because he can't. We're going to do a Soul Slayer this month, and so there's been just novel after novel coming through that the groups are the folks are listening to, or the folks are talking about in Discord, and so I'll highlight that here. And I'm slowly working my way through Moon is a Harsh Mistress. It's a slow read. It's not bad. It's just it takes a little bit.
I'm on it too. I found an audiobook copy, which I'm listening to. There's some interesting accents in there, which, they have a guy speaking in a Russian accent. And then I was listening with my daughter in the back of the car while we were driving around. And she's like, this guy's accent is weird. It sounds like he's talking really fast. And it's like, now that I think about it, I think the last time I listened using this app, I put it up to 1.25 speed. I'm like, yep, that's part of why this sounds so weird. Slowed it down, like, oh, this is a lot. It sounds a lot less ridiculous.
Sure. Especially because it's already, we don't need to get too far into it, but like the slang and the way it's written is already wacky, right? So then to like throw it into like, it'd be hard to follow up, sure. Anyways, cool. Right on. Any other things you want to chat about before we get into this here story phase?
I think that's it. Let's do it.
All right. Well, in that case, your turn.
In the story phase, we delve into the stories, characters, creatures, and environments of the 9 realms. Our story. The tragic hero, Cato Ezekiar, is a wanderer seeking those who have done him ill. When he's ambushed and betrayed by a mysterious figure, Cato finds himself in the depths of an underground world and hunted by a monstrous beast. But there is more at work here than a simple trap, and will take all of the Hollow King's abilities to survive and unravel the truth.
So first things first, he is not a wanderer, listeners. I read this little blurb. I remember, months and months ago when this came out for like Advent, I'm like, ooh, a wanderer. He's a king, fallen king of some sort. This is going to be right up my alley, which is not to say it wasn't up my alley, but I was surprised.
You thought he was capital W wanderer?
Yep. So, spoiler alert, he is not. And even the cover is just like a dragon motif thing. So like there was no hint of, who or what he was. But anyways, we'll get into it. So we're reading Beasts, The Road of the Hollow King. I don't know if The Road of the Hollow King is actually part of the title. But anyways, Beasts by John French. This, for me, was the first John French story I've ever read, which may be surprising to some folks because he's pretty prolific on the 40K side, if I understand correctly.
I am almost positive if he's read, I read I was going to say the first chunk of the Horus Heresy. At the time, it felt like a big chunk. Now it's probably like 4% of the total books published. But I don't remember much about it. If he did, not enough for me to have a opinion coming in about John French is this kind of writer for me or whatever. So.
I had recognized his name. So in my head, I'm like, all right, well, this ought to be good, because if I know of a 40K writer's author's name, then he must stand out in some way. There's only like 3 40K authors that I probably can name. Let's try Dan Abnett, the guy whose name's Aaron, because his name's Aaron, because he's got a bunch of letters in his initials, ADB or something. Anyways, that's the end of my list. Those 3 people. So I was looking forward to reading this just so I could, get another author under my belt, right? Like, we read a lot of the same authors on the Age of Sigmar side. We've been recently getting some newer ones, which I've been really excited about. But this is maybe a new situation I find myself in, where he's an established Warhammer author. It just happens to be on the 40K side. So this was new for me, anyways. And I suppose I'm diving into why are we reading this topic? This is essentially, in some ways, why I was excited to read this story. Did you have any reasons that jumped out at you as to why you wanted to read Beasts?
Well, I think it was. I think I mostly threw it your way, but for me, I think I hadn't read anything with. I think I did know by the time we were picking it that the lead was vampiric. And so I think I felt like I hadn't read from that perspective either. I don't want to say ever, but certainly for a long while. So I thought that'd be an interesting take to go after. So
sure.
That was my vote.
In recent memory, in terms of like the undead vampire perspective, I feel like you're going to get maybe like a Mortark perspective. There's all those Neferata books. I mean, we follow Manfred every once in a while, right? But I can't. I'm sure I'm wrong, but I can't think of any other vampires I followed that didn't have a name before going into it.
Yeah, for me, there was Dynasty of Monsters, which wasn't really from their perspective, but a little bit. Like it wasn't ostensibly from that, but you do get some of that. So, but that's different because they can't really blend into to society like our man, the Hollow King, can.
Yeah, so true. Another reason I'll throw out is we'd be remiss. This is a coincidence, dear listeners. We planned on discussing this book before they announced that they were making minis for both Cato and our boy Drecky Flint. But what a coincidence! Back to back, one after the other, we covered both, or we have and will cover both of those, I guess, characters in their short stories. And I don't know. I was going to say not too long. We'll get those models. Who's to say what long is? It could be years for all we know. But those models are coming. Their novels are coming. And so what a happy coincidence that we were also reading their short stories going into it. So that's very cool. I wondered though. I'm not going to take credit. I'm not going to grab a scry point for this or anything like that. But the fact that they were both like front loading some short stories for both of those characters made me wonder if like they were going somewhere with these characters. So I wasn't surprised when they announced the novels, at least. Models kind of came out of nowhere, which is very cool. What a delight. It helped rereading this story, having seen the model, especially for Cato specifically, in that like I didn't necessarily have a concept of what he looked like. I mean, they said he was a vampire and that he sometimes could blend in as like just a regular person, and so I could fill in what blanks I had. But then they showed the model. I've seen what he looks like now. He's on the cover of the novel too, and so then I got to reread this and sort of insert that dude into this story, and I don't know, it made it a little better because I knew I didn't have to make up my own image. I knew what he would look like.
I like that trend. I like some more back and forth between the studio and Black Library like that. That's fun. I think for AOS, we've seen it mostly just with Gotrek. Like, I don't know.
You could say the Van Dents, the
sure,
Witch Hunters, I guess, but they were, I think, models before they were books.
Yeah. Yeah, this is cool. I'm a fan. I like that little taste of flavor in there. And if you want to use that miniature as your own thing, say convert it.
I will not say that.
Then there's options for that side of things. And if you really like the character, you can run it as that character. So I think that's cool.
Yeah, I agree. I think Age of Sigmar is it needs to be, I mean, Warhammer in general it's like a twofold thing. It's going to succeed in the future based off of the ability for people to create their own stories, whether it's on the tabletop or in their models. But it also is going to lean on the characters that are inherent to Sigmar too, like the characters that Age of Sigmar can create, foundationally. And so this is a great direction. I think it needs to be a setting of characters, and so the more the merrier, I think. Awesome. With that being said, let's talk about some other W's. When do we think this story takes place? David, you got any thoughts on the when?
For a second, I thought it was with Dawnbringer Crusades, but that's not entirely clear to me there. Like there wasn't explicitly a Dawnbringer Crusade that I noticed. Like some of the language about it felt like it would, and I don't know if there were more clues in some of the other stuff you might have read. There's the idea that, like, clearly at some point people have come into, because this is to give a where they're in the realm of death, so they're in Shyish, and people have come in to set up camp. So but that could have been the Age of Sigmar. That could have been, some amount of time after the Realm Gate Wars. So to me, there wasn't anything that said it other than the idea of Stormcast is not novel. Do you have anything else that pinned it down more for you?
No, I'm in exactly the same boat as you are. You said something about there was language in there that maybe made you wonder. At one point, he says something to the effect when he's talking about the town, and we'll get into it a little bit later. But the word crusade gets used once or twice in the story, talking about things, folks that had come to this town. Now, to your point, like maybe they would throw that it was Little C Crusade, so maybe they would use the word crusade when Seeds of Hope were getting created. Or there's that period, like you said, after the Realm Gate Wars, where a bunch of cities of Sigmar were being like founded and identified, and so it doesn't necessarily mean that it's part of the Dawnbringer Crusades. Given when it was written and the things that we're talking about these days, I'm just gonna headcanon choose to believe it was post Dawnbringer Crusade until I'm told otherwise. But like you said, it's not definitively like pinned down specifically.
Yeah, I'm down with that interpretation.
Yeah. I'll also point out, if we're going to deal with whens, we can talk about it from a story timeline. Beasts actually, to my infinite shame, turns out is actually the second story in the Hollow King series. And so the question is, why are we talking about it then? The first one debuted in a White Dwarf, which I had and we were able to read. But to keep the Pocket Realms pure, we're going to focus on the short stories published by Black Library. It's not to say we can't pull information from the White Dwarf story, and they do kind of go hand in hand. And so, I mean, we'll get into what that relationship looks like story-wise in the future. But I will say that this does take place after the White Dwarf story, and there's a sequel. I guess you could say a sequel or a continuation of this story in this book that occurs later, and it's another Hollow King short story that I'll have to look up the name of in a second because I don't have it in front of me. And so this also, I'll point out that this story takes place sort of in the middle of the tale of the Hollow King as we know it so far. All of which presumably takes place ahead of the novel, which I was talking about earlier.
Well, I'm glad we kept our integrity. If there's one adjective everyone uses when they talk about Pocket Realms, it's pure. So
yeah, someone's got to. I'm glad I got that off my chest. I was really holding that one. That was a big weight inside. All right, any other whens you want to chat about?
Nope. I don't think so.
All right, well, let's do some wheres then. So where's the story take place? We already hinted at it. David, what do you think about the where?
Well, for me, they're talking about a town. Was it Glimmerfall?
Glimmerheart.
Glimmerheart. They're talking about a town, Glimmerheart, and I was like, I cannot remember if I'm supposed to know already where this is at. And I think maybe if you were up on it, or
doesn't it sound like a town that we've heard of before? It just sounds like something I've heard of.
Yeah.
Is there something else that has heart in the name of it, maybe? Or like, so Glim's Forge, so I'm thinking Glim, and then I don't know. Yeah. There's another Hallowheart.
Hallowheart. Yeah.
So I put two and two, whatever. I looked it up because I thought I was going crazy, and it turns out I think it's only in these. Glimmerheart is only in these short stories. Maybe it's on a map somewhere. I guess I could have pulled that up too.
Okay.
But I believe it's exclusive to these stories. So we don't know much about it going into it. However, I don't know if I'd consider it a story. We can tell you a little bit about the place, listeners. I don't think it's a spoiler to say as much, but it's in Shyish, which makes sense. The dude's, he's a vampire. I don't know, do I spoil it? Do I let it? Do we know right away? Yeah, I guess you did. Okay, yeah. So it makes sense. He's a vampire. We're dealing in the realm of death, and so given that it's a town in the realm of death, you got to wonder, like, well, what's its underworld situation? Like, how does it relate to the realm of death? Every place in the realm of death sort of relates to the fact that Shyish is an underworld realm, and there's always fun and unique, aspects of cities or regions or what have you. This one's an underworld where people are souls. When they get sent here, they roll up as water, whether it's like snow or rain, but they fall on the underworld or on the underworld and get absorbed up, or they combine up into the rivers and streams and lakes and waterfalls that you're used to, and they form the water there, which is super cool.
Yeah, I liked it. Most of the information, because that very little of that is actually told in Beasts, but if you're in the White Dwarf story, that's where you pick up most of it. And they talk about this idea of water being a gift from the ancestors or from the spirits of those who came before. And that's the sort of like AOS world building that I really enjoy. So if you can get your hands on the White Dwarf, it's worth reading just for a real interesting kind of retelling of, or just a little more table setting for the environment and that kind of thing. The idea, I know Paul Wagner, PJ Shard really likes Shyish for that sort of thing. Like he will talk at great length about gods of death and undeath and underworlds and what does that mean and all that sort of thing. And for good reason. It's a pretty cool concept, and it feels like one of the ways where you can really stretch out some of the things that AOS can do.
Absolutely. I probably should tell you, dear listeners, where you can find this first story where we're learning all this information about Glimmerheart, and that is in the Soul Prey story, The Road of the Hollow King, which is in White Dwarf 471. So check it out. Yeah, nothing else to add. That is very cool. I like the idea. They say something to the effect of the mortals will, when like it's not uncommon for mortals to come and try and find their own afterlives, right? Which is wacky. But they know what they believe, right? And so then they have to like go. Like, I believe this is what happens to me in my afterlife. I believe our souls turn into water, and we it's the combined flowage of our our society.
Let me go double check my math.
Let me go find it. And so they stumble upon it. And how wild is that? And so the living mortals who believe this stuff are set up a city in the midst of these rivers of their flowing ancestors. And it's just very, very Age of Sigmar. Very cool. All right. And any other wares do you want to chat about?
No, I think that's good. Well, I mean, I would just say that it's not much of it actually takes place in town. It is, somewhere close to.
Yeah, true. Good point. Well, in that case, let's talk about who we've referenced him. His name was in the summary. It's Cato. Ezekiar. Yeah, maybe I'm making it harder than it is. It shouldn't be that tricky. Cato Ezekiar. So we've already not spoiled, but talked about how he is a vampire. But man, do we know much more beyond that? I mean, I guess the name Hollow King might give you some hints. But what do you think you know about this guy going into this story?
Well, for a lot of people, it's going to depend on whether you read the White Dwarf story before, which I did not. All I knew was just from word of mouth that he was a vampire. But Hollow King, I assume, he's some sort of past royalty or something like that. But going in, that's about it. Mm-hmm. And I really didn't know anything about it. I didn't know, was I going to be reading about a guy who is currently a king, all that sort of thing. And you pick up pretty quick by the fact that he's in rolling deep. He's not got an entourage. It's just him walking around that whatever he's king of is he's either in exile or it's gone or something like that. So I think part of it will be piecing together. They kind of drop hints of what role he had or what his past allegiances were. Sure.
I'll say, having read all three of his stories, I don't know that I know much more than that, quite frankly. There are hints and you get some glimpses, and you talk about how he's rolling in by himself. That's not completely true. But sure. Beyond those hints, I don't know what he was a king of. I guess you get a sense right at the beginning. I don't know if it's too much of a spoiler to say he's hunting something or someone. Like he's on his own personal quest, whatever that might be. So he's driven by something. But even that is pretty foggy, I'll say. So don't worry, listeners. I can't spoil too much because I don't know too much about what his goals are. I think these are all great teasers to set up the novel coming through. Which is not to say the stories we're reading aren't also interesting, but you can definitely tell that these are glimpses or hints of what's to come. well executed in that regard, I'd say. Any other who's or what's that you want to talk about?
Not from me.
All right. Well, in that case, we could probably jump into a spoiler phase starting right now. Everybody, cover your ears. No, don't. Come on, hang out. Or go read the book real quick. I'll wait the 3 minutes it'll take, and then you can come back. Spoiler phase. Okay, so right off the bat, and I feel like we meet her relatively quickly earlier in this here story, but you said he's by himself. He's not exactly by himself. He's being, I don't know, not watched, guided, escorted, a little bit of a Jiminy Cricket on his shoulder. The spirit of his old, someone that he knew in his past, in his Hollow King days, essentially. So it's this teacher Solia, and she's a ghost, like a specter, a ghost that follows him around. Yeah, and I know this is necessary. I mean, she comes up later in the story. I'm just going to bring her up now because I thought she was maybe the coolest part of these things. Is that she is this shade that is following him, and he talks to her every once in a while. So it's nice to have what could be a very loner story in front of us. He sometimes has someone to bounce an idea off of or talk to.
Yeah, he's got a ring that he can kind of call her in, something like that.
Yeah, agreed. But maybe we'll get more of her later, or maybe we won't, because I don't know that she contributes too much to the story. But we can start at the beginning. Well, I suppose it's not a direct, the immediate events of the previous story don't lead into this, because this guy just wakes up in the dark, right? And we don't necessarily even know how he got there yet. But he's underground. He's in the dark. You would think a vampire wouldn't care, but apparently Cato does, because he's like, whoa. I know enough. I've lived long enough to not overreact to this. Let's see how things go, essentially.
Yeah. So my first take was is this just how he always wakes up? Because I didn't know anything about it. The first paragraph, wakes up in the dark and, holds off on his first reaction, which is to wonder what is crawling up his leg. Right. But I was like, is this, at first I thought maybe this is just how he wakes up from whatever vampiric sleep is oop, here I am in my, coffin or whatever. So it took me a while to figure out that he was legit in a situation and not of his choosing.
You could also envision a scenario, right, where a vampire, it's more of a werewolf motif, but maybe it's a vampire thing too, where you're like, what? Oh hell, what did I do last night? What did I get up to?
Totally.
I woke up in this, in this, like you said, coffin or something like that. Which it's not terribly different than what actually happens, right? And so we'll get to. I mean, there's a flashback later that it sort of explains how he gets here, but we'll cross it when we come to it. You mentioned something's crawling up his leg. Turns out it's a spider with legs the size of my leg, or no, legs the size of my arm or something. It's a huge spider, at any rate.
Abdomen the size of a child's head was the weird simile that.
Which is tricky because I've been told my kids have huge heads, and so that I can just only imagine how big that would be. They can't wear hats, guys. So it's climbing up them, and you realize there's something special to this guy, even besides the fact that he wakes up in the dark sometimes, in that he, lightning quick, is able to dispatch the spider, smash it, and then steal its glowing. Is it ichor or ichor? I only ever hear it or see it written.
I say ichor.
Ichor it is. And it's this glowing ichor that he puts in a vial. And I'm like, all right, well then, okay, is he some sort of alchemist? Why does he have vials on him? And why is his first instinct be yeah, I'm going to squeeze this thing dry? You have other things to do, man. They're bigger priorities. But he's underground, steals some ichor, and he uses it to light his surroundings. And it turns out, he's underground and that he doesn't know how he got here. And he's in this sort of cave. Remind me, because I think he says something to the effect of, or he describes it's dark. He's a vampire. I would assume he could see. Why can't he see? Did he say? I can't. Wouldn't you think that would be no problem for him?
I mean, I there was something challenging his senses. I think I didn't. If there was something specific, then I missed it. Gotcha. I thought, well, maybe just canonically he doesn't have. Or maybe it's just dark enough in here.
Doesn't have dark vision.
Yeah.
People and the D&D communities are always complaining that certain player races don't have dark vision when they should. Tabaxi, they're cats. What the hell? That's dumb, Aaron. So yeah, but he is able to get his bearings and head deeper into this underground structure.
He gets just a brief glimpse of a shaft above him, which he kind of jumps up to check out, but it's clearly been sealed up. So he suspects that he's been trapped in here by whoever got him in here.
Yeah, and whether it's this part or something else, and like he surmises that like anything that could trap me down here must know a lot about me, because if they were able to do so, then like nobody does it accidentally, like just someone like me.
Oops, I trapped a vampire.
Yeah, oh shucks. Yeah. And so he travels deeper into the cave. There is a noteworthy, I don't know. These caves are noteworthy in that they are full of mushrooms, and what does that mean? It's almost as if you could, in Age of Sigmar or Warhammer, like you can never surprise deliver like grots or gloomspite stuff, because as soon as there's mushrooms, like I'm always just gonna. I mean, there's no chance that I'm not gonna assume like what's down here in this cave, whether it's grots or what ends up being down there. But if for discerning Age of Sigmar readers, you have a hint of what he's going to find in this cave or tunnel scene down below. Did anything about the cave grab you besides the obvious mushrooms?
I think there's an experience with the spider venom, and it seems like he can probably breathe as he chooses. Like at one point, he's like, "Whoop, I'll not breathe because I got some like hint of hallucinogenic situation." The mushrooms are kind of acting as like a tension building device. Like they start glowing and they start pulsing, glowing more powerfully as he moves around. Also lighting his way a little bit. Yeah. Then as he's walking along, somehow he realizes sort of deadened to his senses. This specifically did seem like it was deadened to his senses. Like he realized he was about to step out into nothing, and steps back, and there's some massive pit here. And it's part of why he does try to bring his teacher Solia, and she cannot manifest. She's like, something's pushing against me. Not sure what. I can't be here for much longer. Bye, gone.
See ya.
So there's a big pit, and he's like, I need to figure out what's up with that / get away from it. And right as he's making that decision, he is met by a visitor. Looms up behind him.
Yeah, but what a great time, guys! What a great time. We're doing a little flashback, right? I mean, this is classic TV storytelling 101. It looms this big craggy rock structure, but we cut and we rewind. I don't know, a day, 2 days. I don't know how far back. But the Hollow King is in Glimmerheart. He's walking down an alleyway of sorts, which I think is probably how he prefers to travel. He, I think, talks about how he's ingratiated, or he's trying to ingratiate, or ingratiate's not the word, but like blend in with the city, where he's taking a little bit of mercenary work, trying to stay under the radar where he can. But he is greeted by a chubby dude, if I understand correctly. I mean, by that I mean he's got layers of fat over muscle. Our vampire notices. He's got a name. I would love to tell you it.
Byrazan.
And basically, the guy offers him a deal. He says, "I know who you are. If word got out who you were, it would be a lot of trouble for you. So I'll tell you what. I'll keep it a secret. And in fact, I'll offer you a deal if you do something for me." The vampire considers it. He's like, anybody who knows who I am probably is someone I need to be wary of. Like, it's not common knowledge. But he repeatedly turns the guy down and says, "No, I'm not interested." No, I'm not interested. And the guy says, "All right, fine." And I don't know, what is he something descends on the vampire and he blacks out. What was it?
It does not say what. So I think we get some clues to it a little bit later, but you do get some clues about the Hollow King here, though. He has a thought in this flashback, like, only the blood of the damned. And you're like, okay, so he's got some sort of principles. Like, he's going around, he's hungry, but he has some sense, and not sure at this point, like, who does he decide is the damned or whatever. But he's not going to be indiscriminate in who he feeds upon. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's got a code, man. A vampire's got to have a code. That's not true. A lot of vampires don't have anything resembling a code. But he blacks out, and so now we know he was attacked, I guess is one way to phrase it. Someone tried to get him to do a job that he had no interest in doing. He wakes up, he finds himself in this cave. This must all be related. It has to be sort of connected in some way. Fast forward back to where we were. The looming shape behind him, turns out it is a Troggoth. I don't whatever the one that has rocky skin, presumably. And now Kato's got to fight for his life, right? Like, what does he do? Does he have to attack it? Does he have to flee? I feel like he tries all of the above, shoots it with magic, but I think these types of trolls like absorb some magic, and the thing just like isn't like eats the spell. And Kato's like, whoop, okay, not that one. And then he tries to boogie off, essentially, after clanking against his sword against the rocky skin of this thing. He realizes the discretion is the better form of valor, and boogies on out. Missing anything? That's essentially it, right?
No, but it is fun to kind of piece together that this is a rock gut Troggoth. Like if you don't know things about the background of what Troggoths exist out there, for a little bit I was like, maybe this is what are they, the big old Dankhold. But you're like, as he's like, oh yeah, like he's tough, he's rocky, and he's kind of absorbing or resistant to magic. Like, this must be a rock gut. That's cool. And I like that kind of scale of a villain or foe in this. And also, side note, there's some of my favorite miniatures in the line. The proportions are cool. This is the one guy's got like a rock tied to his head as a hat. Just love that stuff. So, I like those guys a lot. But yeah, he's like, I got to get out of here. This is a little bit much for me right now.
Well, and furthermore, I mean, the danger is compounded by the fact that, like, I think he's got the spider venom in his veins or whatever passes for vampire veins. But then he's also, I think, at one point he gasps in and he takes the spores in as well. And if you're ever wondering if vampires are immune to the maddening effects of gloomspite mushrooms, at least this story argues that they are not, and that he's going through a trip while he's trying to escape and like fight this thing too, which I mean is just it's in this tight quarters. I mean, you're used to these vampires being able to like single-handedly deal with most things that they face, and you wouldn't necessarily assume that a Trog would be a problem for them, but like if he's hindered, if he's nerfed by the effects of hallucinogenic substances, maybe it's more of an even fight, or maybe the sides switch a little bit and he's on the back foot, as he seems to surmise in this situation. So he boogies on out. He tries to navigate the tunnels. It turns out that Trog knows the tunnels better than he does, and so he gets met like every step of the way. He gets cut off, and eventually they circle back and they end up this cat and mouse game that goes, it's pretty quick. He ends up back at the pit, trying to figure out, and essentially his back's up against the wall, or in this case, pit. And I think it's at this point, or was it earlier, where he actually spends a little bit of time looking into the thing. And it gets like swirling, and you don't know if whether it's because this pit is magical, though we assume it is, or if it's the the mushrooms and the venom. Like, but he starts having like visions, and like he sees like a city covered in shadow down below. It's this wild.
There's some mention of like glass or reflection. Like, I actually was wondering, like, is he seeing like is there a Shadespire connection here? Like, I
wondered. Yeah.
That seemed like a possibility to me, but it left it pretty ambiguous. I don't know if people who are more familiar with this guy or some aspects of the story somehow are a little more clued in to what might be going on here. But it's some gnarly portal to somewhere. So I was like, is it one of those? Is it an honest to goodness realm gate? I don't know what's the deal.
All the above or none of the above. Tough to say. But he leads the Trog here. It's a classic. He's his back's up against the wall. The Trog roars at him, lunges at him. I think he slices the back of his foot, and then he was able to use his vampire strength to push the thing into the pit, thus solving the Troggoth puzzle. Congratulations. Then the victory music plays and he levels up. And he lives to fight another day. I think it yada yada yadas him out of the pit. He climbs up that shaft that he had seen previously, which has been, whether he clears it or somebody else clears it, and he meets up with Birazan, whatever. Again, and it's just the classic. Well done. You've accomplished. Mission accomplished.
Solved my troll riddle.
Yeah, essentially. And Kato's not stoked, but he realizes that, like, well, this guy obviously had some hand in putting me down there, so I'm not. I mean, doesn't like come at me. Or no, I'll tell you what he does. He does like make an aggressive motion towards him, but the dude just he dangles a little bit of a vial of blood. Turns out this fella, who he randomly ran into in Glimmerheart has a vial of his bloodline's blood. And in some ways, it offers some control over Cato.
Yeah.
I don't know enough about vampires to know if this is the thing or not. I mean, it is for the sake of the story, it is. But this, I didn't know that that's how you could control vampires by having their blood. But apparently, how did you react to this?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of figured that there was some piece of control he had over him, and I didn't. I assume possession of this is what made him able to black out Cato in the first place. So yeah, bold move. Mortal swinging those things.
He says he can do all sorts of stuff. He can take his strength, it can cause him pain, or he can send him into the unsleep, which presumably is what this was.
Yeah,
interesting. But the guy says, hey, I mean, basically he's real congenial about it. He's like, I don't want to have to use this. It's just I needed you to clear out that beast from its nest so that we could have access. And I think Cato surmises that they wanted access to that thing. He's like, look, everybody got what we wanted. He goes, because you cleared it out. That's what we wanted. And here, I'll give you a secret. This is you're hunting for something, and I know where you should go next. So he's very like, chill out, dude. Like, this is totally fine. I offered you a fair deal. You should have took it. And so what he ends up revealing is that on the next step of Cato's mission or his hunt is that there's this tower up on this cliff above the city of Glimmerheart, and that's where he ought to go next. And he starts revealing a little bit of what he knows about Cato's mission, which is very, very little, which is to say, he's like, I know you're hunting the followers of, sorcerers and things. So like, that's where I think you should go next. And so we as the audience learn now that, all right, well, that must be some component of what he's trying to do is hunt down sorcerers and followers of presumably Tzeentch, or at least, the damned, which we can assume is the chaos.
Yeah, there's a good exchange here where he says you can find it on whatever, like the slope with without snow on it. The furthest one, he basically describes the location, and Cato's like, "There's no tower there." He's like, "Yeah, well, seeing it is the first problem." And then Cato's like, "Well, how do I get in?" And you're like, "Well, that's your second problem."
That's the second problem. This guy's cool. I like this dude. I hope we see more of him. Yeah, and then it's at this point, like just towards the end of it, essentially, like they verbally spar at this point. Now that he's revealed his secret, and then he's like, "All right, well, that's not the only thing I know about you. Like, I know that, like." Generally, he's like, we won't get into the specifics because I don't think he gets into the specifics, but he's talking about like, it's, you took power and you just left destruction in your wake. We're just mortals, and we're dealing with like the ramifications of what people like you do. And so like I wish they would have gone more into it. I wish there was more, we've been talking about in these short stories how a lot of the ones that we've liked recently have been like exchanges and like accusations and those sort of verbal back and forth, the verbal fights that you like to see. And this was a glimpse of one that I would have read so much more enthusiastically than maybe the troll fight that is fine. It's neither here nor there, because I feel like he's really hinting on some interesting themes in this. Yeah,
he says it's people like you that set this up. Actually, not people like you, people like exactly you.
Yeah, you did it.
Yeah, you had your time. Like now it's on us. And it's interesting because he's kind of passing judgment, and Cato had actually done that earlier. So this is the kind of man that the kind of person that the mortal realms are that the Sigmar's empires are in the hands of. All these people they're big up on the God King, but really it's in the hands of people like this, and they might call themselves merchants or mercenary bosses or whatever, but kind of not dismissive, but thinks he's got him pegged. And so it's a fun reversal to see it go the other way around here.
Yeah, absolutely. Agreed. And they have this back and forth, and up until this point, Bahrazan is relatively easygoing and really smirky about this, right? Like he has a certain air of, I think, congeniality is what I said before. After his little spiel of like the accusation and like a lot of the finger pointing, he is not smiling anymore. And so you could really sense that the tone has shifted, and that like he's struck a nerve with this guy in some way. And that really, I don't know, stood out to me, that change in the air mid conversation, which again, I love this kind of stuff. Essentially they go from there. Like, actually, this is where he reveals the secret, is how they end the conversation. Mm-hmm. He says, all right, well, your next step's up that away, essentially. But what a great way to end the story. I don't know that I was necessarily grabbed throughout. I mean, it seemed very stock standard in terms of, there's Trog fighting a vampire, which I guess I haven't seen that fight before, so that's relatively new.
Sure.
And then, there's a secret realm gate underground. Okay, I mean, that adds up, that tracks. But then when they got into this part, I'm like, yes, this is on theme with a lot of the stuff that we've been reading lately, and this is what I get riled up for these days, which is very antithetical to like Warhammer stories, right? It's the talking that I am jazzed about. But anything else to add about the ending of this here story?
No, I agree that I agree with you. Like landing on a high point there.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Cool. Right on. In that case, do you have any tidbits or thoughts or things that jumped out at you throughout the story as a whole that you wanted to bring up?
Mostly just what you already covered there, like the interactions. We'll see. We always like to see, like, what does this realm look like, or what does this interaction look like? And what was cool about this was, rather than it's like someone from this realm interacting with someone from this realm, it's someone from this time interacting with someone from a previous time, right? Like, yeah, because Cato has been around so long because he's a vampire that he knew what this and in some of in the White Dwarf, he'll make reference to, knowing some things about the area from way back in his day. And so it's like a conversation across time a little bit here. And that's when two worlds meet is where we get some interesting interactions in this sort of fiction. So I think that's part of what contributes.
That's a great point. And that, like, a lot of times when we notice differences between people, it's one of the hallmark differences is a difference of distance. But this is a difference of, time distance, which is, I hadn't really thought about that, but that's true. That's cool.
Yeah.
I mean, this maybe dabbles a little bit into what did we learn about the realms, but I love adding another underworld to my belt of underworlds that I've experienced, right? So this is yet a new one in terms of the water and flowing into the rivers and things, and that all the souls flow out to the sea, which I keep them coming. I don't ever want to stop learning about new underworlds. If Age of Sigmar was just new underworlds, I don't think I'd mind. And so I love the creative way that different authors can come up with different examples of how what could be very much an infinite number of underworlds in the realm of Shish. So that's very neat. I'm going to ask who your MVP was.
I'm going to snag him before you can, and I'm going to go with Birzan.
Yeah, obviously.
Purely on the strength of that speech. That was cool. So I sometimes like to take something weird, but I think that's a solid through and through. I do like to think about if that was a realm gate, who's on the other end and just has like a rock that Trog fall through. Oh, snap.
Oh, dang. I mean, he's definitely not dead and probably upset as well.
Regenerating as he falls and shows
full
up.
Strength. Superhero lands with the knee down. Club in his hand.
I think a rock got superhero landing just straight on top of his head.
But good thing he's maybe wearing that rock helmet so that he just cracks the rock and then he's fine. That's legit. Obviously Birzan I think is my answer too. But I will shout out to Solia. If for no other reason, because I like her because of the potential. It's what she could be is what has made her very interesting to me. In that is she trapped or is she there willingly? It seems like she's part of this ring, but could she leave whenever she wanted to? I really like that, dynamic. It seems like she might be very much like maybe a conscious character on his shoulders. I think at one point she mentions the fact she's like, don't you should have fed before. Don't go killing everybody, things of that nature. So I like to see that back and forth. She kind of reminds me, it's not exactly the same thing, but it reminds me of the sprite that was with Prince Mesa. The personality is completely different, utterly different, but it allows your character that you're following, who may not necessarily have as many character traits right out the gate, like you don't know them as well. It gives you a chance to learn about them as they interact with whoever's following them, right? It gives them something to bounce their personality off of.
For sure.
And, I think this is definitely going to be helpful going forward. So there's, I think, more to learn from her as well. And I think she was maybe a handwriting teacher. Maybe she was a global teacher. I'm like a tutor of all things. But at one point he mentions that she had taught him how to write things or with a paintbrush or something like that. So I'm like, oh, is she like a calligrapher maybe? Let's see how this plays out. Yeah. So that's neat. I mentioned a thing of what I learned about the Mortal Realms that I didn't know. Did you learn anything about the Mortal Realms that you didn't know?
I wouldn't say specifically in this one. Learned a little bit with the White Dwarf story from this one would be how vampires, power over vampires by having some blood from their bloodline, something like that. So.
Yeah, that's new. At least new to me. Maybe that's common elsewhere.
Yeah.
I'll also point out vampires who aren't jerks. Or I mean, not to say he's not a jerk. He very well could be a jerk, but like who has like a code and like doesn't seem to be so inherently tied to what, the rest of the Soulblight Gravelords are doing. I don't think I have another example of a guy who's sort of flexing his autonomy a little bit, choosing not to like just eat on the innocents. Like,
yeah,
I guess I never ruled it out initially, but this is the first time that I've seen it in action. So yeah, maybe there's something special about this guy that allows him to do that, or maybe there's a whole bunch of like chill vampires running around and we just don't see them. So
real cool vampires with chill vibes.
Yeah, so totally chill. So I want to know if this is a him thing or if this is like a maybe more of a universal thing. And I don't know how you define that, or like when I say I want to know, how do you definitively state one way or the other? But maybe by learning more about him, we'll learn about what it means to be a chill, cool vampire. Do you have any other recommendations for other Black Library stories that you want to call out?
No, I think I'm good.
Yeah, I feel like the obvious ones are just his other Hollow Knight or Hollow King stories. So there's the one I mentioned before, there's this one, and then the sequel that I didn't look up. It's the Tower of Empty Mirrors. Kato Izabaraza, Go short story by John French. So that's the sequel here. And then it's leading into I think it's just called The Hollow King is the novel. So that's coming out. So those are my recommendations, though. If you want to read other stories related to minis that are coming out, you probably have already listened to our Drecky Flint review, but he's got some other short stories you might read. There's another one in the White Dwarf too, and then he's got a novel coming as well. So, hey, listeners, that's enough for now. You've got plenty on your plate to read, so catch up. Finally, we'll just say, what did you think of this short story? We'll wrap it up with that.
I liked it. Again, specifically for the interaction at the end, I actually enjoyed the White Dwarf story a little more. Felt that there's more new there. It was fine having a battle in the dark. But what I like for it is what it set up and the character. So I like it enough that I'm definitely going to go on and read the next one. So just go scoop that up on my phone and read it as I go to sleep tonight, probably. So I'll give it 6 out of 9 iron rings on his fingers. So.
Cool. Did he have 9? I didn't catch that. That's cool.
I think that was specifically mentioned 9 rings in the first in the White Dwarf one. So I'm changing a little bit, but
sure, that's fine. What is there? Is there 9 human rings in the Lord of the Rings? Doesn't matter. Well, did I like it? I'm almost exactly to your point. I think the first one the White Dwarf story sets it up a little better, right? We learn about like who he is and what he's doing. So it seems, I'm sorry, listeners, I wasn't thinking when we scheduled this one, maybe I would have done things differently. But like all in all, I recommend all of the short stories about Hollow King, just sort of taken as a whole. Maybe each individual one doesn't stand out per se, but it's really part of a larger mosaic. This one was fine. Again, the fight in the dark, like you said, it wasn't bad. And I kind of like the way John French writes. Like this was my first exposure to like how he writes a story, and he's very descriptive. And like I like the way he's just like the choice of words. Like he's descriptive in both. Poetic's not the word, but like he takes some. There is a poetry in how he describes some things, and so that it stood out to me in some points where I was reading a sentence or two, and I'm like, "Ooh, well said, my man. Good job."
Yeah.
So that's great. Trog vs. Vampire is fine, but like you said, the speech at the end was hints of the back and forth from Monsters, which is fun. This one's Beast, that one's Monsters. I loved that dynamic, and I loved the little glimpse of it here. And I think what draws me to these stories the most is the mystery. I'm a sucker. You tricked me. You pulled me in by dangling stuff in front of me, Mr. French. That makes me want to read the next one because I'm a sucker for not knowing. I gotta know, like, what's this guy's backstory? Where did he come from? What's his mission? How is he going to get there? Why is he only chew on the damned? And so if for no other reason, you did a great job setting the hook essentially. And so, hey, listeners, if you want a hook set in you too, go ahead and read these Hollow King stories. Man, I make it sound so appealing, don't I? All right. I got to give it a number. Blood. I don't know. I'd give it an 7.5 out of 10 vials of vampire blood, I guess. Man, that's the worst. I'm the worst. It's a good thing these are only
vials of spider acre.
Oh, it's vials of spider, or just maybe vials of gross liquid.
Vials of things.
Yeah, vials of things. Maybe almost an 8. So there's that. I really ruined this episode. Any final thoughts before we get the heck out of here?
No, I think I'm good.
All right. Well, then it's time for our reforging. Chat with us anytime about your thoughts on Twitter at The Mortal Realms. Davey, where can they find you online?
At red_Zeke.
Excellent. And I'm Aaron. You can find me at Dos Asos on Twitter. And you can find all our Mortal Realms shows and content at www.themortalrealms.com. Always an hour.
No matter what.
Hey everyone, it's Aaron, your latest member of the Mortal Realms. Not that I'm the newest member, on the contrary, we seem to keep adding folks to the roster at an alarming pace, but rather I'm the most late, like all the time, like with this episode even. What we got here is a bonus episode featuring a collection of the more recent Pocket Realms episodes that Davy and myself have put together over the past many months. You heard one already, and then there's 2 more coming on this episode. However, I wanted to let you know that I think this might be the last Pocket Realms trilogy episode I release on this feed, at least for a while. I think I'll probably still drop individual episodes occasionally on this feed when it feels right, when the spirit moves me. But maybe that's not enough for you. And if not, I don't blame you. Then your best bet is probably to head on over to themortalrealms.com/Patreon or patreon.com/themortalrealms and subscribe yourself right up, because at the free guild level, you get all the Pocket Realms you could possibly want right when they release every single one. I could add more, but I'm not going to, because I'm worried this is going to turn into an ad, and I don't want that. So instead, I'm going to stop right here, and I'm going to let you get back to those realms that would fit in your pocket. Oh gosh, can you even imagine? Welcome to the Pocket Realm, a Mortal Realm short story phase. Grab your hammer so we can clear a path through the chaos and forge our own narratives in the Age of Sigmar. Your allies to the realm gates this episode are...
I'm Davy, and hey, Aaron. I got a question for you.
Shoot.
What's the difference between an ignorant wanderer and an indifferent Kurnothi?
I don't know, tell me.
I don't know, and I don't care.
And I'm Aaron, and shot through the heart, Radicar's to blame. You give Soulblight a bad name. This is dumb. That was a dumb one. Let's just move past it. Today we're going to talk about The Hunter's Quarry by Colin Harvey. I think Colin B. Harvey is maybe what the book says. Which is a nice little short story that came out relatively recently during Elf week. Nope, we're this far into Age of Sigmar. We shouldn't make fun of the word elf anymore. It's been done. But before we do, hey, Davey, how's it going? How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. I got the kids out of town visiting a grandparent. My wife's laid up with COVID. I'm dodging that right now. So a lot of hobby time, which is kind of nice. I'm unfortunately spending a lot of it editing things.
Sure. That is unfortunate. But in some ways, you're welcome for giving you an opportunity to get away from COVID Central. Ironically enough, at least one of my kids is away with a grandparent. We shipped off one of them, the easiest one, unfortunately. Sorry, future children, that you may or may not realize which one of you is the easy child. I apologize. Hopefully they never listen to this. But cool, glad to hear it. Editing's got to get done, necessary evil. But if I can't imagine that's the only hobbying that you've been doing. This is a great segue into, hey, Davey, what have you been up to in the hobby? Any books that you've been reading? Any games that you've been playing? Any hobbying that you've been doing?
Well, for hobby, I got a replacement copy of Nether Maze because the first one came with a fair amount of damage to some of the models, and I'm okay doing some repair on that, but some of them they hadn't broken until they'd bent quite a bit, and that seemed a little challenging to repair. But customer service is great about sending a replacement, so I assembled up that box, so I'm excited to maybe put some of those into action. And playing some Underworlds, and then book-wise, I just listened to Barkskins. It's an Annie Proulx book, and she's one of my top 3 authors of all time, I want to say. And it was a real marathon listen, like 26, 27 hours.
Oh, geez.
So when I got done, I was like, it was really good. what did I do before times before I was listening to this book on audio? And so I'm like rediscovering podcasts. Now that
As a concept, like the concept of podcasts, like guys,
the concept of listening to them and not just recording and editing them.
Sure.
What about you?
I have no concept of like if that is a long audiobook or not. I'm getting through context that it sounds like that is a long book. But you could have told me an average audiobook is like 50 hours, and I'd be like, yeah, sure, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah,
I read
told
that.
You a gallon of milk is $50. So if it's length of audiobooks and cost of groceries.
Oh man, listeners, there's a fun game that my friends play with my wife. In that it's let's see what Aaron thinks common groceries cost, and it's just good for a laugh for everybody because I have no concept. Well, that's me telling on myself a little bit. All right. So what have I been up to in the hobby? Still doing daughter stuff. I'm so slow, Davy. But I'm getting close. I've moved into the Arena of Shades box, which I was excited to finally do. So we'll do some of I'd already done the gladiatrix, put her together. I'm going to do honestly saving the worst for last. So I'll probably get through I don't know what's worse, the horse, like warlock looking dudes. I don't know. I just feel like they don't fit the army, or the gals with the whips, because whips are garbage. So I've been really putting these things off.
It's you talking about daughters. That was another recent hobby thing I did, since I haven't been on the story phase for a couple episodes. I got to listen back, and so I don't know much about the Daughters of Cain, honestly. So it was a good listen for me right up until the after credits part.
I didn't think you'd listen to it.
Josh tried to throw me under the bus by making you give me more editing to do, and you threw me under the bus saying that I do a bad job at it.
It was obviously a joke. It was obviously a joke. As if I wasn't already on the list. Can't be on the list, maybe multiple lists. But yeah, that's what I've been. As far as books that I've been reading, I'm behind on the Mortal Realms book club, which you too, listeners, can join if you join up on our Discord at www.themortalrealms.com/Discord, where every month we read Age of Sigmar Black Library novel, which fortunately they've been coming out relatively regularly. I wanted to read Hallowed Ground, but I missed that month, and so I started it. But then I'm like, oh nope, next month started, and so I had to hop into what is it called? God's Bane? God's Bane. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I'm really, really digging it. But then like we had to do this episode. I'm like, oh, set that one down and pick up the short story. So I'm perpetually behind in more ways than one. But I'll get there. Or I won't. I don't know, and that's just life. But that's all I got to share for today. So is there anything else you want to chat about before we hop into the story phase?
No, let's get to the story phase. In the story phase, we delve into the stories, characters, creatures, and environments of the 9 realms. The Kurnothi, Kulathis the Exile, seeks bitter revenge on the vampires that have defiled her homeland and killed her brother.
Man, first of all, bravo with that segue. That was perfect. You've done this before. Yes, we are talking about The Hunter's Quarry by Colin Harvey. Like I had mentioned before, Elf Week release. It had a Kurnothi story on the cover, and we said, let's do it, which leads into my question of why are we reading this? I think I might have posed you the entire list of Elf stories, Davy. What about this one jumped out at you?
Specifically, we don't know much about Kurnothi in general. We've seen a war band. We've seen the fighter pop up in Curse City, Kulathis, the Exile, aforementioned. And outside of that, do we really have anything?
I don't think so. No, not as far as I know. I mean, I don't know where the Kurnoth hunters fall into play. And quite frankly, I don't know that I still don't necessarily know, which we might find out more when the Sylvanus Battle Twin drops and we finally cover it, because that's the only time I ever read about this stuff. But as far as Kurnothi are concerned, I don't know much more personally.
Yeah. So that was the main motivation. It says that I think we often use this to kind of, it's either jump onto something that we have like an affection for, or try to find something that explores something we haven't looked at in a while. Yeah.
Hey, another good point, because that's part of the reason why I was interested in this, is because I love me some wood elves. And although the Wanderers exist in Age of Sigmar, it seems as if the Kurnothi might be, I still don't know, quite frankly, if the Kurnothi are the spiritual successors to the wood elves. And so because of that, I was drawn to this here story. And also to your point, I don't know much about them and I would like to learn more.
When they first dropped in that Beastgrave box, that's 100% what I thought. I was like, oh, okay, well, like here's the twist that they're gonna do. Here's what wood elves are gonna be in Age of Sigmar, and that was a couple years ago now.
A while back, yeah.
We haven't really seen anything more of them. So
yeah, agreed. Really slow rolling this. I haven't given up hope. I mean, it in the same way that it took a little bit for Dark Oath to get rolling, and I would argue maybe they're still not rolling. There are plenty of examples of like, I don't know, side sub factions that, I mean, they'll dabble, they'll drip, and they'll never necessarily grab the spotlight. And this might just be one of those. Which I wish that wasn't true. I wish that wasn't the case. But we'll see. I think GW also does a good job about like just sitting on stuff until the time is right, and one day they'll drop a whole bunch. I mean, they could drop a whole bunch of stuff out of nowhere, and we wouldn't have seen it coming. So,
never do.
That, fingers crossed. So that is the why. Let's talk about the when of this story. David, do you have any thoughts on when this tale takes place?
See, I knew you were going to ask that.
Because I ask it every time.
Dun, a little bit. Well, yeah, exactly. But for once, I anticipated a little bit, thought about it a little bit in advance. Mm-hmm. So theoretically, we know pretty clearly when it's happening because Kulathis is battling forces that are aligned with Radukar, but has not yet gone to Ulfenkarn. So it is post existence of Radukar, pre-Cursed City. So it's like, oh, I'll just look that up and see when it happened. There's some like canonical problems here.
Oh.
Like my understanding is that Radukar, like the citizens of Ulfenkarn, struck a deal with him to help in their defense. And once he was already installed, after a while, he kind of the Necroquake is what gave him extra surge of energy, more bestial. As his necromantic, energies spiked and things got real bad. This one talks about him like invading Ulfenkarn. And so as far as I could figure, there wasn't a clear, like, this is when Radukar like actually invaded the city. So theoretically, if he is being a violent, nasty boy, it is post Necroquake, but it's not like Soulblight are awesome all the time. So, and I think his arrival at Ulfenkarn dates back to the Age of Chaos. So all of a sudden, because it's unclear, because the way this marries up with canon is unclear, then the timeline's a little...
I got you. Yeah, no, and I agree in that I think it generally fits into, a timeline. Like you get the beats of what will happen, what has happened, or what will happen. But you're right. It may be playing fast and loose with some of the details. I didn't stop to think that hard, and that like I knew Radukar rolled up at Ulfenkarn at one point, and I know he's a bad dude, and he ends up taking over the city at one point, and so that was enough for me to place she is caught in the wake of that. And, I won't say what happens next. We'll talk about it in a little bit. But so like that generality is enough for me. So it's around that time. But it's a good point. Like if you look at it too closely, I think some of the cracks in the timeline show, which it's not uncommon for stories like this, especially because I think this is Colin's first Black Library tale, which is not to say he doesn't follow the lore closely. I'm sure he does. But like it's Black Library isn't necessarily known for like adhering to timelines as closely. So to that, I'll say I can forgive and forget in that it makes sense in the general of how these timelines line up. Maybe not so much in the specific. Do you have any other thoughts on that? Good point, though. I hadn't thought about it that hard.
I mean, I didn't think I was going to, but I was like, let me just, look up the timeline of Ulfenkarn, have some sense of that. And then fell down a little bit of a rabbit hole. Sure.
I would have slammed my computer closed. No, not today. You'll not trick me. All right, let's talk about the where. Did any wares jump out at you? Wares jump out. It's like a werewolf jumps out. Anyways, did the location?
You got it. Like, just keep riffing. It can only get better.
Definitely can't get worse.
So there's they call it the Weald, which is where where these Kurnothi are living. If I didn't know that Ulfenkarn and Radukar were chilling in Shyish, I would have no idea that this was in Shyish, but it is.
Yeah, true. So speaking of looking stuff up, I looked up Weald. And first of all, it's confusing because like all the first Google results are all talking about the region of England. And so I'm like, no, this has to mean a general thing. I don't think they're in England. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't believe so anyways. And so I think it just means forest or possibly like that, which makes sense if we're dealing with Carnathy, they're living in a forest. I don't know if that's a Weald with a capital W. Like I don't know the region around Ulfenkarn all that well to identify if like that's literally the name of a forest in Shyish, or if they just use that term for therefore. I mean, like, just is that their word for forest? Are all forests all that? I'm not sure.
My instinct was that this was what they were referring to, like it was their sort of internal word for it. But
okay, gotcha. So,
but I don't know. Sure,
makes sense that. Well, it may not make sense, but there are forests in Shyish. They probably got folks living there. No reason why the Carnathy wouldn't be living there either. So that's my take for sure. Let's talk about the Who. There's at the very least a character or characters that we are aware of ahead of going into this story, and that's going to be Kulathis, the exile. We were talking about before, the new Carnathy character that was included in Curse City. She's a bow elf. She's got antlers, but this is essentially a backstory for her. This is a tale that shows where she comes from, and it fleshes out that character a little bit. Did anything grab you about Kulathis? Or did you know anything about? I should say, did you know anything about Kulathis before you read this story at all?
Essentially, no. I just knew it was Kulathis, the exile, and she makes it into Curse City at some point. I've not read the book, and I only played the one mission, although I still got the box and shrink wrap on top of container. It's this idea at some point my kids will want to play it. That's a lot of assembly and painting I'll have to do.
Oh, yeah, it is. That's, I think, what I'm going to do next, actually, is after I'm done with the daughters, I'm going to switch to that. So but talking about Kulathis, the exile, I mean, the one thing we knew is she was an exile, right? It's in the name. And yep. I don't know if it spoils anything in that, like, this story maybe gets to why she's the exile. So that essentially is all I knew. I don't believe she's in. I didn't finish it. Can't say. I haven't read too much about her either. I didn't. If I were a better lore podcaster, I would have read the Curse City novel. I would have read the book in the game cover to cover, but I didn't, dear listeners, because I'm bad at this. And I'm sure she's got some blurbs or insight a little bit into who she is, but I think this probably fleshes her out quite a bit. So, or this short story does. So I'll hold on, and we'll find out more. Stick with us. But before we jump into our spoiler section, Davey, is there any what's that you want to cover before we get into it?
Not for me.
Yeah, I don't think so either. Other than the fact that yes, this is a flashback. This is a little bit of a catch up for Kulathis, the exile. All right, let's do some spoiler stuff in the. I got to ramp up for this. The spoiler phase. It takes some inertia to get there. All right. Short story, not particularly long. They never are. We are in the point. We start with the point of view of not Kulathis at all, but a vampire, and it takes a second for us to realize that she's even a vampire. Davey, was this as disorienting for you as it was for me?
No, because like one of the first words they say is Kosargi or Kosargi, I guess.
I don't know.
And I recognized that as the ogre bodyguards from Curse City. And so I was like, okay. I assume we're starting off from the perspective of antagonists here.
Rub it in. I guess I'm the dumb one. Cause I mean, there was the antlers on the cover. I had known, someone had mentioned to me that this was going to be a Kulathis story, or maybe I read the blurb and like, so there's this vampire lady, but she's like muscling around these Kastargi, and I'm like, I don't, is this how she does? Is she friends with the zombies? Like what is this elf doing? And it took me a very long time to realize that no, this is actually a vampire. And so I guess it's not uncommon for Black Library to have the points of views of their books be the enemies of like the main like subjects of the story. And so eventually it occurred to me that like, all right, well maybe the story will be from the undead, and like, oh, maybe the Carnathy are going to be like the scary ones, right? Like, oh, they're striking from the cool. trees. You can see how they'd be the enemy, right? It is short-lived because she. It turns out that she and her bodyguards are on the hunt after this Carnathy. Apparently, this girl, I think they refer to her as, and it. She's laying in the woods after they've been chasing her for a while. The vampire realizes, oh, this is probably a trap. So she holds her bodyguards back, and so there's a fun little blurb about how the ogres look down and they're surprised at how she's physically able to like hold them back from this because they big, she little. But she realizes this is a trap. Ogres don't seem to care, and she's like, "All right, fine, your funeral," and lets him in. To like close in on this, downed Carnathi girl, and surprise, was a trap all along. And then this is where the introduction to some of our more main characters, some of our elven characters are. They leap to action, which is what we find here. How did this opening scene work for you, Davy?
Was the thing I got a little fixated on was that this the ostensible reason that this Carnathi was even like up in their territory was she was stealing an ornamental plate or something.
Oh yeah.
I was like, what? An ornamental plate? What are we talking about here? And who
is she? My grandma?
Yeah. she's like made it look like she's tripped on a root, knocked herself out and broken the plate. And the vampire's like, come on, you didn't trip on a root. Come on. Then she's like, yep, sure enough, it was a trap. And then Kulathis gets the action movie one-liner, like, and so is this, standing behind her and shoots her with an arrow that explodes her into a million billion pieces. So. Yeah.
Dodge this, casual.
Yeah.
Cow. And she explodes. There's also another Carnathi whose name I am about to utter in 2 seconds. Landstarn, who's a dude Carnathi, and he wields like a silver javelin or something like that, which I thought was pretty cool. So that's essentially, it was the cold open of this story is vampire perspective, chasing this Carnathi girl, then they're ambushed and utterly destroyed. Score 1 for the Carnathi team. And that's how the story opens. Anything else grab you from this scene before we switch perspectives in, I guess, time?
No, that was it was a ambush from which they are victorious. Back to the ornamental plate, though. The piece of it is used like of almost deadly weapon. Splits a head that's not quite enough to finish off one of these Kosargi who. This leader Kosargi takes a whole lot to get down. First has its head split open by a piece of plate, and then he gets javelined in the back of the head, arrowed in the back of the knee, and even the javelin has to get twisted in the head before it goes down. Yeesh.
Woof. Rough stuff.
Yeah. All right. But yes, this scene sort of establishes Carnathi are super rad.
Yeah.
Powerful.
OP.
Yeah.
All right, and so we circle back. After this, the scene ends and then opens back up, and I think the Carnathi, this band of Kulathis and her friends. Oh gosh, I don't remember it well enough. Because it's tricky because there's a bunch of flashbacks dropped in. So plot wise, I know what happens next, but we get a chance to like learn about this crew a little bit and what ties them together. I think they are heading towards. They're making their way towards this, I guess, camp, or I think at one point it turns into a fortress. It's like the center of their old ancestral home because they had been driven away from it. And the story spends some time sort of explaining how this came to be, flashback, why they are where they are, and sort of their reflections on it. It turns out that Kulathis had this brother whose name is Nurago. Nurago's best friends with Landstarn. I don't know, maybe there's a slight romantic interest in Mira, who is that sort of bait gal. And so they're fairly close knit. They were living in harmony with nature, as wood elf replacements often do, but it was then the Fire Nation attacked. I'm sorry, then Radikar and his vampires attacked. They sort of reflect on the fact that like, we should have known. Like they got the drop on us to some degree. They attacked our outposts or what have you. We couldn't hold them at bay. And then she talks to them. It was an inevitable, overwhelming force, wiping out the Carnathi in this woods, doing a fair number of sort of eliminating the leadership structure. Those that survive had to escape. They get exiled. And a lot of Kulathis' family members, her father and seemingly her brother, are also killed. How did you take this flashback, this explanation of historical events?
Well, there's some beats here that were, I was hoping for some insight into what it was to be Carnathi. They seem pretty isolationist, right out of the gate. They're saying, the weald is all, the weald is the world. And Kulathis, who is more interested in doing a little more exploration, discovers like, well, hey, it's not actually true. There's a lot more out there than just the wheel. It's actually just a small part of things. And talks about, there's even a line there about encountering their cousins, their temperamental Sylvaneth cousins, which I don't know that relationship I'd ever seen it written like that.
I don't know that I've seen any relationship at all written, quite frankly. So
sure. So
you know what I mean?
That was a piece of noteworthy information. And then, the invading Soul Blight are wrecking everything. And there's a long thing where her father gives a statement. He talks about how her brother was kind of appeared to have been gobbled up or singled out. Her brother helped the elders escape, and she and her father stays alive long enough to kind of recount this horrific attack. And his dying word is revenge. So that is what her motivation is from here on out.
Yeah. And what more powerful motivation is there than that? So that essentially sets the scene, or sort of describes the driving force behind this crew. They all know, they have sort of shared, the history from a race or societal aspect, but then they also have sort of the shared love of this brother that is probably gotten gobbled up as well. And so that is, I think a lot of that is driving them forward, and they're heading towards the seat of power for the soul blight in their Wales. Apparently they'd taken over and a region of this forest, and that's the direction that they're headed. While they travel there, I think they pass through some woods where they find a lot of their elven friends, family, other citizens of their society who've been strung up in these trees and are being bloodletted, which that seems par for the course. That sounds like a very Soul Blight thing to do. And this is a point of a little bit of dissent in the ranks, where her allies want to start cutting these folks down, and either try to save them or end their misery is probably more likely.
Yeah, Mari's like, hey, let's save them. And Colossus says, no, that is not revenge. Let's keep going.
Yeah.
And they make an appeal. They're like, wouldn't your father be pretty proud of you if you saved people? She's like, right. So it's almost a mirror of that first, where the vampire lord was like, it's probably a trap. We shouldn't go in there. And Colossus is like, it's not on mission. We probably shouldn't go in there. Okay, fine, we do. And in both cases, it goes badly.
Yeah, sure does. Because in the process of trying to cut them down or save them in some way, they are beset by more vampires. Oh no. And now there's a bunch of them, whereas I think they were just fighting the one before. And this fight doesn't go nearly as cleanly. I believe it's here where Mira gets taken down, like a big old chunk of her neck gets bit out. But eventually the Carnathi, or the remaining two, do survive. And I think do they eliminate all the vampires, right? They don't escape, do they?
Right. They kind of eliminate the vampires, but then more are going to be coming, so they got to run for it.
Boogie on out of there. So they head towards, I think there's a hole that they know. There's a secret den or something that they can lay low in. And this is more opportunity for reflection. And again, it's some downtime for a hot second. I don't know was there much being done in that downtime, or should we just keep going story-wise?
Only that Kulathis kind of figures I don't want to risk any more of my friends. I'm all in on revenge. I know what I need to do. And so basically Kulathis drugs Lanstarn so that he sleeps heavier, and then slips away to go take care of this lieutenant, one of Radikar's lieutenants, who is kind of leading this whole escapade.
Yeah, which is nice because it's a good job writing the story in that, you can have a big bad, but have it not be Radikar. And it makes sense, how this worked. Radikar marched on with his forces, or maybe they weren't even the ones who were in the Whale. I can't remember. But there's this lieutenant who's now in charge of the goings on, the Soul Blight mission in this woods. And so that's the target that she has now for her revenge mission. And that dude's name is Zakramice. Zakramice? That sounds right. So she heads and she finds their central compound. They dug out this hole, I think, and there's earthen walls to some degree. And there's a big old party going on as she sort of creeps in and climbs the walls. And it turns out it's very much a classic Soul Blight, both sophisticated and also drinking a lot of blood at the same time, scene where this lieutenant is holding court. He's got a lot of hangers on. He's got servants, which let's put a pin in that. And so she is essentially trying to infiltrate and try to figure out how she can get to her quarry down, sort of down below. She looks down from these walls, which is this lieutenant. David, what'd you think about this? Did the scene seem authentic to you?
Sure. I'll talk about it a bit later, but it was fine. Like it felt a little, she ends up having the drop gotten on her while she's kind of watching things, which felt a little more plotty than consistent with how she's acted up until now. So I
think they refer to her as an assassin, right? Like I think at some point she's a renowned assassin, and like rule number one in assassinship, everybody knows this, is you're supposed to get the drop on them. Do not let them get the drop on you.
Yeah.
But she must have forgotten.
Part of it is that she does realize that her brother is here, basically as a zombie, as a hollowed out version of himself staggering around, and he is one of the servants. So it's kind of the shock of that lets a couple Soul Blight catch her, knock her out, and then tie her up.
Yeah. And it's shocking to see your brother as a Soul Blight, but he's also getting knocked around a little bit. Like he's not being treated with respect. And that's even, to my mind, that was even more jarring, right? To see this vampire be real mean to this elven zombie that he's created.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like you want to really bully somebody, then you like bully him in life, kill him, bring him back as a zombie, then bully him as a zombie. Ooh.
Yeah. Which I think that was the point, maybe though, right? Because the brother had like done some work during that invasion, right? And so I think this was a particular insult to him because he had helped save some of the elders, and I'm sure he dropped a bunch of vampires in the process. And so this was he very much was being punished, like specifically.
Yeah.
Which I thought was interesting. But like you said, yeah, she gets knocked out in her infiltration, and she comes to eventually. All her weapons are taken. She's all tied up. And the classic villain montage where the lieutenant has to have some choice jabs, barbs, perhaps, really getting in his final
monologue
to really stick it home to her. It's during this that he realizes that she recognizes the zombie, and so he maybe in a very quick leap of logic realizes, oh no, you know him. Oh no, you love that dude. Like you guys are related. And so he thinks, oh, what a delicious punishment that we have here. I'm going to have your brother eat your face, as zombies are prone to do. And so he orders the zombie to go and eat her face. And the zombie shambles closer and closer. And all the while she's trying to get him to wake up. She's trying to appeal to some sort of, not humanity, but elf-vanity in his person. Hey, it's me. She says something. What is it? It's, the brother always wins. What's his name?
Narago always wins, which is a line she used to throw. They had some game which was leaping from tree branch to tree branch, and it was like, I don't know, treetop soccer, basically. Mm-hmm. And her brother would take it so hard when he lost, she would always kind of throw the game at the last minute. And so there was a saying that he was proud of, Narago always wins.
Yeah. And so he's got his hands on her head. He's going to start squishing it like a melon. And she gets it, looks him dead in the eye. Narago always wins. And he, for a split second, realizes what's going on, who he is, and stops. And I think he stumbles after the lieutenant or something like that in revenge, which I don't know if that works. I don't know how that works. I don't know enough about Undead to say if this is possible or not, but in this story, it is possible. And he lunges at the vampire who was unready for this. In fact, I feel like he was like leaning close to watch, and then, oh no, zombie in the face. And it throws him off balance. And then like all hell breaks loose, essentially. The other vampires are there to try and rescue their lord. Qualathis is able to get out. Oh, because the zombie actually breaks her out, right? Her brother like breaks her bonds. But all she has, we missed the arrow part, right? I missed the whole thing. At one point there was an arrow freed in the process, and the vampire ended up got hold of the arrow, but she then gets the arrow back because it was sticking out of her brother, who the vampire had stabbed. And so now she's got her lone weapon is this Oak of Ages Past arrow. And she's like, well, what am I going to do with this? Apparently a lot. And things go south. Davy, tell me about what happens or what struck you about.
Well, she's still in a pretty bad way here because it's her and her zombie brother who may not stay opposed for very long, and she has one arrow, except Landstarn wakes up just in time to come diving in with his silver javelin and create enough of a ruckus to kind of give her a chance to do her thing. So she dodges, weaves around, comes to face to face with Zachromyce, and he ends up decapitating Narago. So he's kind of distracted briefly by that zombie attack, and he's like, "Hey, you missed." And she's, "I didn't fail." And he looks down, and he's movie style got the arrow in his chest, and then explodes.
And then he like MCU snap, like disintegrates into like ash.
Yeah, and gone. Yeah, and that's it. It kind of doesn't take us through the rest of the fight. She is standing on a hilltop. She's got her quiver bow. She's got Mira's knife, and she knows that this is just one part of it. Things are going to keep happening, so she needs to go take care of the problem at its root. She's avenged her family. Now she needs to avenge her people, and she heads towards Ulfenkarn. Yeah,
Radakar's got a target on his back. Also a wolf pelt on his back. Yeah, that's about it. It's worth mentioning that her friend with this silver javelin is like leading the vampires off on like a wild chase. I think the assumption is that they caught him eventually. It was very much a suicide mission, was my guess there.
That's true.
Though if you die off screen, maybe next book, maybe next story, he comes swooping in again. Every time. All right. So yeah, that about sums up the story. Do we miss anything else plot-wise?
No, I think that was it. I think it's notable that she's exiled specifically because she continued to try to seek this revenge that her father hypothetically tasked her with his final word. Whereas the rest of the elders were like, "Hey, let's not poke the beast. We've got another place to run to. Let's hide out there." So it does explain why Calathus is the exile in that way.
Too true. The elders actually boogied on out to the Everspring Swaith, which then speaks to the connection to the Sylvaneth, right? Because when you think of that place, you think of Sylvaneth. So I wonder, do they pledge allegiance to Alarielle at that point?
Yeah.
Furthermore, because I think all the Kurnothi characters that have war scrolls all have the Sylvaneth keyword, which is interesting. So I'm curious to see where that goes to our earlier discussion about, what Kurnothi are going to end up doing. Anyways, all right, so that was the story. Let's talk about some questions that we got here. Davy, who's your MVP? Who's your fave in this year's story?
Well, I have a couple possibilities. Why don't you go first? Because I can back up if you happen to steal mine.
So I think I like Mira because there were... Not to be unkind, but I feel like there were very few standout characters with personality in this here story. Calathus is just driven by revenge, but that can be relatively one dimensional. The Landstarn is nice how he was always swooping in to save the day, but it's fine. You didn't get too much. You didn't get too much insight into him. The brother had some depth. I'm listing all the characters that I'm not picking essentially, but Mira is where where I think it was fun, right? She was it seemed as if she was younger, seemed as if she was a bit naive. She did the bait thing, which was kind of cute and clever.
Yeah. Well, her signature move is playing dead because when she actually does die, Calathus is like, for a moment, I hope that she was just playing dead.
Yeah, exactly. And so they talk about how I think the word elves get thrown around relatively fair bit. So I'm under the impression that they're all elven, but in my head canon, I picture Mira as maybe one of those fawn looking dudes in the warband. I wanted more of that, and I think we'll probably talk a little bit more as we talk more about this book. But it more maybe not impish isn't the impish in a characteristic sense, not as a physical shape sense, and the fey-like creature in the woods, and because of that, I think I was really drawn to her, and I was legitimately sad when she got her neck bit off, because I wanted to see how she could contribute to more of the sneaky, and in some ways whimsical plots and plans moving forward. So I think that's who I would pick. Davy, who is yours?
I'm going to go, and I sometimes pick these for the person I can identify with. I'm going to go with Kulatis's father.
Okay.
Because when she comes across him in this flashback, his life is leaving from every pore, I think, like so he's like super dying. But then he has that like long Midwestern goodbye where he's like, they came in great numbers and this other thing happened and your brother fought them and then he got ripped up. But not before he like said a long good, like maybe managed to get the other people out. And that was cool. And they really hated him for that. And, man, you really need to go kill these. I was like, wow, this guy has a lot of last words before he.
Is it the classic where he gets out a sentence and it looks like the life is faded from him? And then he gets a second wind and he goes and changes the story. And then she thinks he's dead. And then she slowly backs away. And at the last minute, his eyes both open, revenge. And then that's it.
Exactly.
Keel's over.
So, yeah, I haven't died yet and done this, but I've tried to leave a place and made it last much longer because I couldn't stop talking. So
you and me both. Also, you're always telling your kids to get revenge on people.
Yeah. I wish they'd listen.
Don't stand for it. I'm curious what some of your other options would have been.
Oh, my other one was specifically Mira for
nice.
for her signature move being playing dead.
Playing dead. Okay, fun. Right on. Is that your signature move?
No. Well, I was hoping that you would pick it because I was like, I don't think Aaron's signature move in a fight might be to play dead. I don't know.
Look at me. Of course it would be. Obviously, my signature move in like a strongly worded argument is play dead. Oh God, we killed him. All right. Did you learn anything about the mortal realms that you didn't know before?
Mostly just that comment about Sylvaneth being their cousins, the Kurnothi cousins. And then tangentially, because it prompted me to look up a little bit of the timeline of Ulfenkarn and the Cursed City. But that was more of a supporting reading, sort of, rather than directly from the book.
I gotcha. I learned that shards of the Oak of Ages Past, which is where her arrows are made out of, Kulathis is apparently explode vampires, which, I mean, it's wood. It's like a stake to the heart, I guess, that jives with vampire lore. But like this, the fact that they specifically call it out and like the Oak of Ages Past is like pissed and is dropping these undead is something that I had learned here.
Yeah, she was gifted a arm-sized splinter, I think, from the oak, which is way off in Gairan. So she's traveled there, perhaps, or something like that.
I wonder. Well, I mean, again, there's the parallels between Kurnothi and Wanderers. Like maybe she hadn't gone there, but maybe Wanderers had.
Yeah.
To this point, maybe this will be my segue into it. Hey, David, did you not learn anything about the mortal realms that you would have liked to have learned?
I mean, this is my biggest objection, right? Is like, I grabbed this book we chose this because I wanted to learn more about the Kurnothi, and I feel like I've learned almost nothing. This could have been about Wanderers. This could have been an old world. Could have been in the world that was, and it could have just been wood elves. There wasn't any mention of like, if you were reading this and you didn't know anything about the background, you wouldn't know that Kurnothi had, like, many of them had those, that there's a crazy centaur one or, goat legs or whatever, like there's all kinds of, I wanted to learn more about that, and that didn't.
Yeah, correct. That's the gist of what I was getting at, and that I don't know any more about the Kurnothi than I necessarily did before. Other than when they die, they plan on being with Kurnoth. Maybe that's another thing I learned too. But who is Kurnoth in this setting? I know that's maybe not the point of this story, and I get like the story is trying to serve something else. The goal wasn't to introduce you necessarily to Kurnothi; it was to introduce you to a singular character who, in some ways, she doesn't even necessarily have a lot of the hallmarks of what we thought Kurnothi were going into it, which is also something that I don't particularly love. So I get that wasn't the point, but I had expectations of one thing, and the story was something else. Which it's hard, even if the expectation was solely on me, it's still not hard not to be a little disappointed about that. But like your point, she could have been it. She could have been a wood elf, could have been a wanderer. Very little Kurnothi coming rising to the top of this here.
I would have believed him to be Lumineth if it happened to be in Hish. True.
bow and arrows, elves, playing dead. I get it.
Elf doing elf things.
Elf's got an elf. Everybody knows that. So I am right there with you. I feel bummed out by that. Any other things that you learned that you want to bring up?
No, I don't think so.
All right, cool. Then, do you have any other recommendations for other stories from Black Library?
Well, it's a little challenging here because it's going to be things that I haven't read. If you are interested in more of the Cursed City timeline, obviously there's the C.L. Werner book, which you could check out.
Yeah.
And I did not read the Beastgrave novel yet, but my understanding is that has...
I think we've been corrected. I think that's actually ends up being more Sylvaneth, I want to say.
Oh, you're correct. Yeah.
However, there is a short story, which is The Warden in the Mountain, which I also have not read.
I did read that.
Okay.
That does. That's where I'm conflating the two. So.
I gotcha. I think they came out in a similar time, and it's like in the mountain, right? You think Beastgrave all of a sudden. Yeah. So did that, I haven't read it yet, but maybe I will. Did that give you anything at all about the Kurnothi as a
more than this
tool?
Not a ton. So
shame.
I mean, they're like the Mountain Beastgrave is really kind of the oppressive, overwhelming sort of character in that. So
gotcha. I will say that there's the short in the Dark Chasm compilation that, although I don't remember if it follows the warband, the Kurnothi warband, but at least they are prevalent in it. All right, so there aren't many Kurnothi stories out there, which is why I was really hanging my hopes on this one, really breaking those doors wide open. Well, maybe there will be more. I look forward to that day. All right, are there any other points of interest or things that we didn't talk about that you want to bring up?
No, I think I'm good.
Very cool. Yeah, I don't got anything else either. So we're gonna have to dive into this review. I feel like we've touched on it. We've dipped our toe in what we thought, but we're gonna have to dive in. Davy, what did you think of this here short story?
So I mentioned already that the Kurnothi characters in here felt like they could have been any other elven race. Like they just kind of read as elves to me, and to some extent that actually goes on to the bigger story. It felt a little like not to be overly demeaning, but it felt a little like ad lib. Like here are the beats, and we're going to plug in these particular villains. Like it felt pretty tropey with a lot of the things that happened. I didn't feel particularly surprised by any of the things. Some of it's that Kulathis is going to live. That if there's a lieutenant important but we haven't heard of before, then that bad's probably going down. So between not learning anything new and not it's a lot of these Black Library come to try to learn something new about the Age of Sigmar world, and then sometimes will happen upon something that really hits for me well with story wise, whether or not learned new things about it. And this kind of didn't do either of those things for me. So it wasn't bad, but it wasn't. It didn't grab me on any of the things that I would normally hope for. So I would give it, we'll say, 13 out of 25 exploding vampires.
Okay, explode, and that's probably on the low. I'm sorry, not low on the rating, but low on how many exploding vampires there were in this story. I agree with a lot of that. When we talk about our short stories, we're always so delighted when they focus on this like idea, right? We always talk about like, oh, that is a great idea that you could build a story around. It's like this core, gem or something in the center of it, and the story sort of stems from it. I don't know that this story had a core conceit. It was more functional, I guess, in that like, how did Kulathis get here? Essentially, let's just walk us through it. You were definitely right that it was tropey, or it seemed very paint by numbers to some degree, which is fine. Like I can't point to any one thing in this story and say that was bad. There was no bad parts of this story. It's just that you saw a lot of it come and it played out the way you'd expect it to, and all the people ended up where you thought they were going to be, which is to say one was alive and everybody else wasn't. And so you can kind of predict that when like the body of the brother was missing, there was what. I will say, okay, when you say there were no surprises, I was only surprised insofar as I thought the brother would end up being a vampire. When a vampire attacks, and then your brother goes missing, my mind goes to, all right, well, now he's the vampire too, not zombie. So in some ways, that was a little surprising. But yes, he was still under the thrall of the bad guys. It was fine. I can't muster up any more enthusiasm than that. Nothing wrong with it. It filled out at least the history of a character, maybe not so much the character of a character. And
that's a good distinction.
We're brought up to the present day. So I look forward to the next Karnathi. This was fine. I look forward to the next story. One of these days we're going to learn a lot about them. This just wasn't the one to do it. So in terms of, I don't know, ratings, I'd maybe give it a 3.5 out of 5. Shards of the Oak of Ages Past. Because also I want to learn more about the oak. Actually, that's another thing. Come on, we need to spend some more time around the Oak of Ages Past. What's the deal with that?
Maybe we will if we talk some Sylvaneth.
Ooh, too true. Yeah, actually, obviously, Aaron, it's coming up. I look forward to that day. Though when this episode releases, who knows in the timeline? Time's going to be all timey-wimey with this guy. All right, so those are my thoughts on the Hunter's Quarry. Any other parting thoughts before we get the heck out of here?
Negative.
All right, let's do the dang thing. It's time for our reforging. Chat with us anytime about your thoughts on Twitter, at The Mortal Realms. Davey, where can they find you online?
At red_Zeke, or you can get us at WTHcast on Twitter or in our wonderful Discord.
Yeah, so wonderful. Probably the best thing about us. I'm Aaron. You can find me at Dos Asos on Twitter at Twitter. That was a weird way to say it. And obviously, if you're listening to this, you're listening to the story phase. And you can find all our Mortal Realms shows and content at www.themortalrealms.com. Welcome to the Pocket Realms, an Age of Sigmar short story phase. Nope, a Mortal Realms short story phase. Grab your hammer so we can clear a path to the chaos and forge our own narratives in the Age of Sigmar. Your allies through the realm gates of this episode are...
I'm Davy, and the only reason I'm still part of this podcast is I promised Aaron I would be the one to kill him.
Oh, God, and I really hope you are. And I'm Aaron. And show me how to fight for now, and I'll tell you, baby, no, that's not how you do it. Show me how to fight for now, and I'll tell you, baby, it was easy. Coming back here to you once I figured it out. You were right here all along. It's like you're my mirror, a mirror staring back at me. And that's me talking to my really reflective sword.
Oh.
Yeah.
What are you quoting there? Man,
close. Oh, no, that would be another good one. I literally Googled songs about reflections. No, it's Justin Timberlake's hit song Mirrors, Davy.
Oh, yep. All right.
Pop icon Justin Timberlake. Anyways, today we're going to talk about reflections in steel. See, reflections, mirrors, it makes a little bit of sense. And this is a short story by C.L. Werner. Excited to gab about this one. But before we do, hey, Davey, how you doing?
I'm doing just fine. The school year has started, which means that I have a little bit of time to myself during the week when I'm on the days that I'm not working, which is something that I missed. I love my children very much, but
children, if you ever listen to this, we love and appreciate you, and we're so excited to see what the people you could turn into. So I'm sorry that I have to eat into this little bit of this personal time, because I'm sure the last thing you want to do is hang out with Aaron, talk about a podcast, self-burn. Those are rare. So very cool. I'm doing pretty well. I'm in the same boat. I'm glad the school started. And it's also freezing outside. So boom, there goes summer. Cool. Well, so we're going to talk about Reflections in Steel, a short story by C.L. Werner. I had already said that, but before we do, let's start the way we often do. Davey, I want to know what you've been up to. It's been a while since we've done one of these, so I reckon your story will be a little updated. It'll be new. It'll be fresh. What's the last hobby that you've been doing, or the last game that you've played, or the last book that you've read?
I like to use the Pocket Realms to talk about books that I read. And I actually have been doing some Black Library stuff. I read the Godsbane, and then I am halfway through Kragnos. And Godsbane was fine. There were things that I liked a lot about it early on, and then it lost some steam for me. What I really liked is that one thing that we have on our Discord is these book club threads. So I think the listeners, or maybe they're not all listeners, maybe they're just Discord denizens, did a book club on this and several other books. And so once I was done, I could go and read along, read all what other people thought of it and discussions about certain points, and feel validated in some of my thoughts. But Kragnos right now, really enjoying that a lot. Very cool. Free guild cultures is the most appealing thing to me so far. But even some of the other, when you see some other factions written thus far, they've been interesting and well written from their little blurbs too.
Yeah, right on.
And outside of Black Library, I finally read Parable of the Sower. It's an Octavia Butler, and that was very good.
Okay, very cool. I've heard of that
one. A little
one.
bit of a bummer, but very good. What about you? What you been doing?
Similar. I mean, I had started a long time ago, but I feel like I've only recently read those two Black Library books that you just mentioned, specifically those two. In fact, in that I did read Kragnos a while back when the book or the Discord was going through the book club, and so I definitely love that one. Geimer rarely misses, and this was not a miss. In fact, it was one of his best, I would say, all the way through. So not just spoiler alert, it stays pretty good throughout the entirety of it. And then after that, I went out of order. I read God's Bane after the fact, and I agree with you. It was good, not great. Some fun ideas that I think were ripe to be touched on, like the idea. Well, I'm not going to give that's not the whole point of the book, but just like it's got a theme throughout that I thought it was high time we dove into it, and it was an admirable attempt at telling a story around it. So I think it was pretty neat on that regard.
Yeah,
and like you said, it's been such a boon to have the book clubs, with their own threads in our Discord. It's very fun to like have a focused in deep dive into the discussions. It's like a Moral Realms story phase, but with 20 people instead of the same 3 people that I had listened to over and over again. You can't see me pantomime mouths jabbering with my hand.
Yeah.
So
but they know they're imagining it.
They can tell. It's all in the tone. Haven't read, and now I'm actively reading the Dreckie Flint novel, Arcanauts Arcanauts Code, maybe.
Code?
It is great. The short stories, I think we enjoyed. We talked about it in a previous Pocket Realms, but it seemed as if they're. It was just to me, it seemed like kind of like a bog standard KO with like a charismatic leader. The novel, and one of the few instances where maybe the novel I think is doing a better job than the short stories, at least so far, because I'm only a couple chapters in, is that it allows you to it spends more time with the crew, and it spends more time with the characters. And Guy Haley, who writes it, has done a great job to make the crew a merry band of individuals, which is not how that phrase normally goes, but they're not nameless, faceless people. They all have sort of their own thing, and man, do I love when a bunch of people have their own thing. So far. The book's holding up. It seems like high adventure. I'm all for it. So I'm looking forward to finishing that out, and I will probably recommend it unless it falls flat on its face.
You love when characters have their own thing. Do you have your own thing?
Oh gosh, I mean, obviously yes, and I think it goes without saying. Anyways, so I've got a couple of things, as the listeners well know, and one of these things is my buckling shelves right here.
Yeah, good to see him again.
Yeah, you missed them. So,
yeah.
All right, let's get into the story phase of this here short story. So, Davy, if you would be so kind as to take us there.
The story phase. In the story phase, we delve into the stories, characters, creatures, and environments of the 9 realms. Taken by Chaos Raiders, young Kenji suffers as a slave, but does he have the strength to step onto the Eightfold Path and join his captors as a champion of chaos?
Hopefully. Otherwise, not looking good for Kenji. Right on. So, Reflections in Steel by Seal Werner. Apparently, it's about we'll get into what it's about, I suppose. But first things first, let's do our W's in an attempt to remain spoiler free. And I think the one we normally start with is why. Why are we reading this here book? Davey, I can't remember because we suggested this a long time ago, and it took us a very long time to record an episode about it. Do you recall why we thought this was a good idea?
I don't actually recall why we did, but once we got done with summer stuff and came back together like, okay, what did we pick? And saw it was this, and we're like, let's just say it was because we knew that Slaves to Darkness had a book coming up.
God, we're so smart.
Yeah, it could have been the reason why. I'm not saying it wasn't. I'm just saying we couldn't remember, and that's as good a reason as any to say it.
I think so. Agreed.
Yeah, I think also I felt like it would have been a little bit since we'd read from a perspective of a chaos story. So.
Yeah, true. I can't remember the last time we did. I mean, we've done elves, we've done vampires, KO. We need to circle back around and get into that chaos.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm all about it. Yeah, I don't have anything else to add. I'm pretty sure that was the extent of why. Plus, I think Okay, no, I do. I don't think it's been a while since we've read a C.L. Werner story. Maybe not ever in the Pocket Realms. That's probably not true. This is like episode 15. I'm sure we had to have touched something. Don't know what.
If only somebody would like keep a spreadsheet about this or something, we could.
Well, I mean, I literally can. I mean, there is a list. I could literally just go look right now, but I refuse to because now I've backed myself into a corner.
Where you're most dangerous.
Claws out. Yeah. All right. Well, then let's talk about the when. Then these are going to be quick. You're going to sense a theme here, listener. But the when. When does the story take place, and does it inform anything that's going on in this here tale? David, you got a when that jumps out at you?
I do not. Who knows?
Ditto. Triple question mark.
Yeah. It could literally be in the Age of Chaos. It could be in the current era. So I saw nothing to point one way or the other.
Sure. It seems reminiscent of some other stories that we've seen in the Age of Chaos. But again, it could have been at any point in time. And not much more to delve into beyond that one. Similarly, likewise, did you get a sense of the where at all in this story?
They make passing reference to where some individuals are from or where some tribes are from, but it wasn't made obvious where they actually currently were, as far as I could tell. And there weren't any like clues. There wasn't like a carnivorous hill to be like, aha, grr, or, anything like that. So
yeah, true. And furthermore, I mean, it makes a vague reference to the fact, like later in the story, I don't think this is a spoiler, it references the fact that a lot of different realms have been covered or like traversed, or like there had been points where they were in different realms. And so that might have been true here, in that like it's intentionally vague because they could have been anywhere at any point. Like this was a far ranging story, although that doesn't really contribute to the story really all that much. I'll have a thought later in the middle of the book. They're at a location or a scene, and I wonder if that says one or two things about where they might have been at that point, but neither here nor there. And then finally, we got a who. We've named him before, but who is the story about? You got any thoughts on our boy Kenji?
Kenji, we don't know a ton about, other than he is part of a village that bites it real early on, and it's about his life once he's been taken by these chaos, or where his life goes after being attacked by these chaos warband. So spoiler alert, he doesn't die in the first 2 pages.
Just flip through the rest of the page. These are just blank. What's going on? Agreed. So we follow, the story follows Kenji. And I guess that covers the what too, is it's our guy, and what does it mean to be, where does the life go after you've been attacked by chaos? And that's the thrust of this year's story. So that's our what as well. Yeah.
Kyoshima is the town that he is from. So that's his. If anybody happens to know where Kyoshima is, find it on a map somewhere. You've solved our puzzle.
And then now the Mortal Realms is yours. You've earned it. This is your show now. Congratulations. It's a gift and a curse.
It's a real monkey's paw.
Very cool. All right. Any other W thoughts that you want to share?
Not me. What about you?
Nope, not at all. All right, cool. Let's dive into some spoilers. Just spoil the heck out of this thing.
Spoil it.
In the spoiler phase. All right. So it's been a while since we've done one of these. I believe what we do is we talk through what happens. All right. So like we said, Kenji living in Kyoshima, I believe he starts with a nailed boot in his back, face down in the mud as his village burns around him. Great place to start, in media res. How did you take this? What were your feelings reading these first few paragraphs of this wanton destruction, Davy?
Well, so I had not, unlike how we read the little blurb, I had not read that. All I knew is that it involved chaos. And so reading this, I actually wasn't sure if this Kenji was going to be the person we followed, or if it was just setting us up like, hey, check this out. So they spend a lot of time talking about what the guy looks like, this warrior that has a boot in the middle of his back. Kenji's crying out because the hobnails in the guy's boot are cutting into his skin. Oof. So there's a brief moment where I was like, oh, are these two going to be characters that we follow going forward, or which one? And then the guy on his back gets in a confrontation. He doesn't know what they're saying right away. But someone tells him to stop right before the axe descends to end Kenji's life. And it is someone with a abnormally reflective sword. Should not be as clean as it is because he's been killing all Kenji's peeps.
My brother's blood should be on your sword right now.
Yeah, it is not right. And there's this argument, and then this warrior with the reflective sword cuts down the person who was about to kill Kenji, which, he saved. Just kidding. Now he is slapped in manacles, and he is a slave. Yeah.
I half expected mainly because modern media has conditioned me to think this, but very much axe comes swinging down and then freeze frame, record scratch, and then Kenji says, well, I bet you're wondering how I found myself in this. But no such luck. We never get much insight as to, literally what happened here, other than that he lives in this village, Kiyoshima. It was sacked by chaos worshippers, chaos marauders, chaos warriors. And like you said, I hadn't really thought of it, but C.L. Werner does spend a bit of time describing the guy with the boot in his back. And I'm harkening back to just a little bit ago when I just read the story. You're right. I did expect to spend more time with this nasty dude with the I'm trying to think about what else he had.
Like a chin tattoo and
a
skull mask and horns coming from brass horns coming from that. Yeah,
faces exactly. So I'm like, we're spending a lot of time with this. I wonder who this guy's going to end up being. He ends up being dead, is what he ends up being. And it's clean sword is the one essentially who persists, and he's got a cool helmet because it's like a wolf helm, but it's got ram horns, I think he says, attached to it. So it's this gnarly amalgamation helmet, and we find out later that individual's name is Garm, who's this chaos swordsman with a reflective blade. It's worth noting that Kenji sort of is taken aback by the sword because here in his village, it sounds like they have an aversion to like sorcery, and he would be loath to actually be killed by the sword because I don't know, it's bad luck, or
there's words that it would. Yeah, that it would pull your soul into it, and you wouldn't be able to go to one of Nagash's underworlds. So I think that's part of there's an interesting moment here where it's right after he gets the chains slapped on him, and the harsh tongue of the invaders slowly becomes understandable to him. Did you think this had something to do with the chains themselves? Or are they like some sort of enchanted? They have something going on with them so that any slaves that these reavers capture can then understand them? Or
I didn't until you said that.
Okay.
I thought it was they were speaking one language, and then when Garm started talking to Kenji, he switched to the language that Kenji knew. I just assumed they were switching languages because did I dream this? That later in the story, he said something to the effect of Kenji started saying, "Well, I've started to pick up what they were talking about as I spent more time with them," or no, maybe I added that into maybe I inserted that mentally. That's my own headcanon, maybe.
Maybe.
But that's a good point. Like, yeah, he doesn't really address it. And normally that's the sort of thing that an author really lays it on thick. Like, I put these, and I started understanding as time goes on, but I just thought he switched languages. But no, I like yours better.
While the youth struggled to break away, the invader shouted at him, his voice shifting in tone and cadence. Finally, there came not gibberish, but words Kenji could understand. Yeah.
Oh, you're right.
The barbarian noted at once the difference that came upon Kenji. You understand me, he repeated, a note of cruel laughter. So maybe, I don't know. I think both those readings get it, but I definitely had some sort of sorcery thing or enchantment.
Well, I thought it was noteworthy, just period, the fact that there were other languages even referenced. I think oftentimes Age of Sigmar kind of hand waves over like the language distinctions, and it's incredibly common that things that you wouldn't think could talk to each other often do with no real issue. And it's rare that they even reference other languages with the exception of Duarden languages, right? I feel like oftentimes that's the one thing that they always focus on is here's some fun words that Duarden know. But with that aside, it doesn't really come up all that much, which from a guy who plays D&D, like a lot, like language comes up quite a bit, right? Then whether you understand this or that language or what you have on your character sheet is noteworthy. I always thought it was sort of a notable absence in Age of Sigmar. Interesting. Good catch. What else do we got? So yeah, he's slapped into manacles. He's sort of delivered or put under the charge of this pretty sadistic or malicious slaver, whose name we find out later is Sazal, who's a whip wielding, no talk back in, real mean son of a gun, who seems to take real delight in torturing and making life generally hell for his slaves.
And he has pierced his lips with a bunch of bone splinters to make it look like he's got a second set of teeth. That looks real scary, I bet, and also has to be very impractical. Like, gotta be tough eating your lunch,
or extra easy because you got more teeth. Like, oh man, let me tear through this thing. Let me tell you, Davy, being the father to a 6-year-old, it's actually, in fact, pretty common in my household for someone to have multiple sets of teeth as they wait for their teeth to fall out, and it is as gnarly as it sounds. Real gross.
Yeah.
Sorry if you ever listen to this. I love you very much. You're beautiful. No, I'm making a thing. All right, very cool. So yeah, he's got this whip. I think this book has a series of time jumps or time skips, right? And so he's plopped in the manacles. He desperately wants to, kill these folks that have done this to him, especially the slaver, because he's particularly sadistic. And then it sort of jumps ahead a little bit to after he spent some time as a slave. And we find ourselves, working outside the camp. He's been with them for a couple months now, so much so that the constant wounds and torturing that he's lived through at this point, it now is starting to be a little more than a minor inconvenience to him. And they've got him doing some real dirty work, the sort of work that, True Blood followers of Chaos have no interest in doing themselves. How did you find this, Davy?
Actually, it was maybe, I don't know if it's the first time we've seen this, but it made sense to me as like, oh, right. Like, any army, even a chaos army, needs certain logistics to get by. And that's not very glorious for the old dark gods or whatever. So yeah, you would find somebody to do that for you. And so all these people they've taken with them either end up as food if they are too weak, or if they're strong enough, then they will do these crappy tasks that the Chaos Warriors themselves don't want to have to do.
Can't blame him. If I was a Chaos Warrior, I'd make him do the same thing. So we find that Kenji is let's call him a butcher, I guess, or at least someone who's preparing meals. And in this case, those meals happen to be his friends. So as time has gone on, there weren't very many slaves that had been taken from his village because very few survived. And over the course of the month, even fewer lasted this long, or the months, I should say. And at this point, he's been tasked with carving up people, because followers of Chaos are not uncommonly cannibals, and it turns out that he's been given the specific task to prepare a resident of his village who, although had made it this long, wasn't making it much longer. And so typically he's his job is to serve up dead folks who have perished, but in this case, in a particular sadistic turn of events, he's actually going to have to kill one of it, like I don't know, some artisan or something from his village. I can't remember, a blacksmith or something like that, who's normally hardy and hale, but at this point has been so emaciated that she can no longer go on. And he's got to kill her. He doesn't want to do it. He has an internal struggle, but he knows if he doesn't do it, in some ways, he's also allowing his captors to win. And so he reckons it makes more sense for him to do perform an act of mercy on this gal and slice her throat and then carve her up.
Yeah.
Oof. And it's what's worse is like she's awake, her eyes are like open, she's in some ways to some degree aware, though also resigned to like her fate. And I don't know if that makes it better or worse. Maybe even a little, well, no, probably better. If she was screaming and crying, I feel like that would be worse, but that's not the case here. It's a harsh life out here in the mortal realms.
Yeah. You have a little bit more interaction with the slaver, Sazal. Kenji has promised him, like, I'm gonna live long enough for you to see you die.
And he's like,
so I was like, LOL. Like, lots of people have said that and hasn't really worked out for them.
And I feed them to the vultures. Yeah.
Yeah. But animosity continues here.
And it's noteworthy too. Furthermore, not only are the the Chaos followers cannibals, but like even their mounts eat people as well.
Yeah.
And so that's part of this too. I can't remember if maybe he was even doing this for the horses. Because like they're not particular, like the people that he's killing aren't particularly strong or, meaty. And so they end up feeding a lot of this to their mounts because they think their mounts will become strong if they eat the peoples. So in some ways, even worse. Cool. All right. Any other thoughts about this particular scene before we time jump again?
Kenji does say, "I'm sorry," as he kills us, and it's maybe kind of the last time we see any remorse for him. Spoilers, but it is it is representative of something that he's had to do many times. But it's maybe this one particular. We don't know this for a fact, but it might be the last person he ever encounters from his village.
Could be.
So he's kind of killing the last thing about his village other than himself.
And it's very symbolic, right? Because from then on, like how much of himself persists, we'll find out more as the story goes on.
Stay tuned.
At the end of this scene, there's some movement in the camp that he's sort of on the outsides of, and he sees that the banner of his Chaos Champion that he follows is on the move, and it turns out some scouts have found a village that is in need of some raiding, and they're going to be the ones to do it, and so he has to come and help. I don't know, capture slaves or do slave work on the way.
Yeah, and haul back loot, that sort of thing.
That whole jazz. And so, like, as we jump into the next scene, we find out in his internal monologue that like it's hard for him to get excited about something like this, unlike everybody else, because he knows that he's not going to get a shred of any of this stuff, whereas everybody else is like slavering at the idea of slavering at the idea of being able to carve out and get some choice loot from this raid that they're about to do. So the plan is that Garm and the rest of the mounted warriors are going to zoom ahead. They're like, hey, we're going to get there before they have a chance to close the gate. All you foot sloggers, you can just make sure to secure the holdings once we've done it. And as they were marching originally, some of these Chaos warriors were getting pretty exhausted, or warriors or marauders. It doesn't not super explicit about who is what. You can read between the lines on some characters, but they're like dropping gear as they go because trying to make it lighter so they can keep up with the mounted fellas. And then finally the mounted continues like, nope, we're going ahead. And the rest of the foot slogging Chaos are like, are you kidding me? Like, these guys think they get all the loot. Let's go. And they get this second wind and they surge ahead. And now Kenji is struggling to keep up, specifically because he doesn't have that motivation of reward and plunder. Sure.
But he does notice something as they're going. Well,
even before that, it's worth noting that in order to keep up with these folks, the people who are foot slogging are having to like shed like supply, like the gear off their backs, right? In order to keep up. Yep. I mean, otherwise it's a pretty grueling march. And so they're just dropping stuff left and right, which is noteworthy. And also a very Chaos move that if people start falling behind, whoop, there's a sword to the back or maybe a spear.
Yeah. It's not like, oh, bummer, you fell down. It's like, not only did you fall down, but I'm going to stab you as I go by. Oh, sure. Wow. Okay.
And so much so that the slaver is getting on Kenji's butt and he's trying to like trip him and stuff because like if he goes down, he's staying down probably. Is the implication. And so there's a not funny, but very antagonistic relationship on that front. But to your point, as they are going in a lot of the stronger forces peel off and like double time off to this village that they're going to take out. Kenji starts seeing hunched, slinking figures flanking the rest of the column as it makes its way through this, the wilderness. And it soon is revealed that these slinking, sneaky forms are that of Skaven, who have been, the reason I brought up the point earlier is who've been collecting and scavenging all the stuff that's been left behind. But now that they feel like the threat has sort of passed or moved on ahead, they're going to ambush the tail end of this train. And
not all of the mounted warriors are gone. They're just gonna. We got the numbers to take down the foot sloggers. Here we go.
Classic Skaven move. So a fight breaks out. Skaven surrounding those stragglers who are still behind. Kenji still manacled. And seeing that the Skaven had a point, right? They have the advantage. They've got the superior numbers, and some of the Chaos followers are dropping left and right. It's a very precarious situation Kenji finds himself in, even so much so that Sazal finds himself surrounded by Skaven as he's cracking whips left and right, which is still a fun weapon. I like Sazal for that reason
Yeah.
is that I love seeing offensive whip. I guess when is a whip defensive, but using it to great effect. He knows what he's doing with this thing.
Yeah.
What'd you think about the fight here?
It was good. So Kenji gets attacked, but just by one Skaven, which is convenient because he couldn't. He's lucky to even fight off the one. Like he just kind of puts up his hands, like no, and then the sword happens to hit the chain in between them, and in that moment of surprise, then he kind of reacts and managed to choke out this Skaven with his chains and take the Skaven sword. He mentions later, he's like, "Oh, probably only one went after me because I don't have anything for them to steal. They're scavengers, like there's not a lot to be gained."
Good job, CL Werner, because you knew the audience was wondering, oh, really? Just one dude? Why would that be? All right, well, okay, justifiable reason. You win.
Here you go. And then he surprises these Skaven that are ambushing or that are surrounding Cizal, who's not doing too great. He's been stabbed a bunch of times, but with Kenji's help, he makes it through that, and Cizal's like, You saved me, and Kenji's like, but not really though. And
surprise.
Yeah. His opening play here is to throw his sword at Cizal's face, connects, and manages to take him down, finish him off. Coming up from that to see then Garm has returned, slaughtered off what remains of the Skaven. Am I understanding this right? Kenji's the only one of the foot sloggers to have survived this ambush?
As far as I know, or if anybody else did survive, they were unmentioned and unimportant, I guess, for the sake of the story. But I think it makes it a more compelling arc for this guy, maybe if he's the only one who did it. Maybe a less believable, but a more dramatic storytelling if he is in fact the only one who survived it. Yeah. It's interesting the way he throws the sword at Cizal, but what really kills him is that he's taken his chains in between the manacles and he's literally just beating him across, whipping a different form of whipping Cizal across the face with him over and over again. And he laments the fact that at one point he had killed him, but he just kept whipping, and he bemoans the fact that he missed the opportunity to savor the fact when he actually definitively died because he just kept wailing on him with these chains. Kenji, I think you're losing yourself a little bit.
Yeah. Lost in the frenzy, huh?
Yeah. That he is. And so Garm and his forces come swooping in, driving the Skaven off. And is it at this point that he breaks the chains off Kenji, right? It must be. Yeah.
So Garm raises his sword, strikes down. Kenji's like, there's no way I was going to outrun this dude. I'm a goner. But instead it's his chains that are broken. And Garm here studies him, said, you can run if you want, but I don't think you want to run. And Kenji said, you destroyed my home, you killed all my people. Garm says, I cut the strong from the weak, which gives you some of that slaves to darkness philosophy, a little bit why they're doing what they're doing. So he says, you have chosen to fight, go ahead and keep fighting with us. Come on and get now you can get some plunder, or you could stay here. You might just die your wounds, whatever you pick. But if you want, you can try to become a Reaver if you survive. And that's the last we see from that era in time. We go to a time jump.
Yeah. I liked I think it was a well crafted point or element that they call out the fact that he had no initiative or drive to move forward because he knew he had no prospects of the share of the loot, but now he's been definitively given the opportunity to do so. And so I like the callback. I like the tying that up with the bow. It really I think packaged this bit of story up very well. So I think he did a good job there.
Yeah.
And time jump we do. And so is the next one the volcano? It must be.
Yeah, the next time we see him, he's actually all brassed out. He's got a bunch of armor of his own. He's got scalps that are hanging off of things. He's got a helmet.
He's using them as the brim, as a sweat guard for his...
As a sweatband, yeah. Which it's got to be itchy and gross.
Isn't that what a scalp... I mean, that's kind of what a scalp is to some degree. Form and function. And he is marching, or he's riding alongside, right? He's on a mount too. I don't know if it matters, but he's shoulder to shoulder with the Chaos Warriors of Garm's band or war band, or I don't know, platoon, whatever you want to call it, in the Slaves to Darkness. They are marching up towards the volcano. They're on a volcano's edge, and they look down and they can see there's these structures built into the base of this, or into the walls of this volcano, and it's studded with gems and things. And they are here to tear the place apart, ransack the place. And so when you're dealing with homes built into volcanoes, there's only so many folks who could live there. And you guessed it, it's the Fire Slayers. And those Fire Slayers march out from their holds in lockstep to repel these invaders. And we spend a little time before the battle starts. What had jumped out at you pre-battle here, Davy, that you thought was interesting?
Two things I'd say. So one was the Fire Slayers are described as having obsidian black skin. So in all other ways, so I think that might have been the first thing they described. And he says, as he'd traded with Duarden from his village before, but these looked nothing like the Duarden he'd seen. And so I was like, oh, are we about to see Cast Warden? And they're like obsidian black skin. I was like, oh, what's going on? And then it describes them more fully. And I like that the description is like from somebody who hasn't seen Fire Slayers before. Like their hair is puffed up like a cockatrice, and then it started talking about the runes in the skin. You're like, oh, okay, we got Fire Slayers here.
Sure.
And Garm has dismounted specifically because they're in these lava fields, and he doesn't want to get pitched into the lava because a horse like bucked or reared or something like that. Yeah. Like that's not a glorious end when there's so many more glorious ends available in this fight.
Mm-hmm. So. Yeah, it's like, oh, we want to die in battle, but not like that. I forgot about that part. It's fun when to your point about like seeing things that we know through people's eyes who don't know them, right? It's very much where he's like, well, there's these Duarden, and he's describing on the details. I'm like, come on, guy, it's Fire Slayers. Yeah. Where have you been for the past like 5 years? Because it doesn't come up all that much. I don't know. People who are, Fire Slayer scholars probably know when you see the obsidian skin and like the volcano, right? They may be able to put two and two together of where this is. Yeah, there's
probably a lodge or something that is characterized with this.
I don't know what it is. For a minute, and this is what I was maybe talking about earlier in the show, is when they had mentioned that there were so many gems like baked into the volcano that made me think Chamon, just because there's a lot of gem-based stuff. But I don't know if that's true, or I don't know if there's onyx skinned or obsidian skinned Fire Slayers there, so I'm not sure. Could be.
If you know what lodge this is, stop yelling at us through the podcast because we can't hear you. But send us a message because I'd like to know.
Yeah, please do. Or send us a message about literally anything else. I love getting fan mail. So yes, the fun thing that jumped out at me was that there's a new character introduced, which is, we're over halfway through a short story. Do we really have time for new characters? But Vanya, who is a reaver in this war band as well, and she makes the point saying that she's really, I don't know, enthusiastic about the prospect for all the loot that they're going to be able to pull from this place. And Kenji, not admonishers, but maybe corrects her or gives.
Get your priorities straight, lady.
Yeah, exactly. Straightens her out and stay in your lane. And that like glory is what we ought to be chasing, and the loot kind of comes after. And she's like, no, don't worry about that, buddy. You're all mixed up. And so this was a great glimpse or insight. This illustrates the changes that Kenji has started to go through, right? Like to think that he's even speaking of glory, and that the carnage that they're going to wrought is obviously a pretty big departure for some kid whose village was ransacked, years and years ago. So it illustrates the character arc that he's going through. And then the battle starts. Fire Slayers march out. The Chaos army charges them. There's this vanguard led by Thur the Dravgoli, apparently a bunch of cannibals, which is noteworthy because I'm pretty sure everybody's a cannibal. So like this guy must be his group must be uber cannibals, maybe cannibals that eat cannibals, because they come charging out as the vanguard or right behind the vanguard, and they take a bunch of axes to the face. They used to be the vanguard, but then they took an axe to the face, and they essentially are eliminated. It was a fun little blurb there. Right? Well, there they go. But hot on their heels comes the rest of the army, who essentially benefit from the screen that Thur had run through. They wasted all their axes, and now that the real carnage can begin. What'd you think about the fight, Davey?
It was cool. I was expecting, I don't know. I'm not a comprehensive fire slayerologist, but I thought they were going to step forward and blast him with magma pikes or something like that. But it was the hand axes. Interesting. The first volley was like to somehow outrange the Reavers, and there was a second volley that like, oh, well, now there was javelins and stuff thrown back. I was like, I feel like you could throw those javelins a little farther than these axes, but
javelins very aerodynamic. Hand axes, not so much.
But they did. There was just that cool little bit of Fire Slayer flavor where the axes were just like going right through armor. They were as Kenji and his group are leaping over the bodies of the wiped out first wave. They're like, oh, it doesn't just smell like blood; it smells like seared flesh. So these axes are super hot.
I say we retire the phrase like a hot knife through butter, and instead it's a hot axe through armor.
Yeah,
you heard it here first. TM. And so the fight rages on. Kenji takes out a few Duar, and he notes how strong they are, and he's sure that it's where the circumstance is different, they'd be able to take him out, but he's hacking and slashing his way through. But then what comes cresting over the edge of the ball? Oh no! We got to set it up. I can't just jump right to the Magnadroth. He sees so hacking and slashing. He sees Vanya in the fray. In fact, he kills a Fire Slayer. Maybe he's about to kill one, and then Vanya comes riding in, and she kills one of the Fire Slayers. So she comes in for the save, and then she hops down and starts prying out the gold runes out of one of the Slayers, and to illustrate the point that they were making before, Kenji's like, whoa, what are you doing? Like, there's a fight here. There's glory to be had. And she's like, nope, there's money to be made. She starts.
Well, and she also, her argument is not just about the money, but it's like, no one will believe you that you like did a lot of glorious stuff unless you can show like all the trophies and loot that you got.
Yeah.
And Kenji is like, that's where she's wrong. Like it just matters. You're the only one who really knows.
Sure.
Like it's an interesting like chaos self-actualization sort of thought exercise. And I was like, oh, all right. Not where I expected to get that kind of like, believe in yourself sort of speech was from the guy walking the path of chaos, but I'm here for it. That's all right.
Yeah, it's definitely great. It's in your own heart, that, what you accomplish, but it doesn't matter because the conversation doesn't go on for much longer, because what comes cresting over the edge of this volcano, the scaly clawed foot of a Magmadroth, and squashes her flat. So
she gone.
Yeah. It was fun while it lasted. It's one of those, you can't take it with you. In this case, you can't take stolen pure gold with you. And now we've got a Magmadroth on our hands. Surprise! No one ever suspects the surprise Magmadroths. Now the battle is essentially focused. And so Kenji takes it upon himself to try and bring this thing down. He gets underneath it. There's weak spots, a glowing Zelda point where he can slash at it. He chops off a toe at one point. All the while the rider, whether it's a Rune Son or a Rune Father, is hacking at him with his big old pole key axe thing.
We also discovered during this fight that he has a sword in one hand, and in his other he carries a chain.
Yeah,
I thought that was cool. Just a little bit of a link to his past there.
What? A what to his past?
A link to his past? Is that a Zelda reference well? Just, and a chain reference?
Yeah,
it's both?
Yeah. I mean, right? Zelda's good too, but like on the nose.
You mentioned the Zelda point, so it's a double. It's a triple.
You're right. Okay. We're going to cut out the explanation. The audience is going to choose from. Aaron, focus. All right. Very cool. And so it's just this Chaos Warrior guy. Kenji's good, but he's not that good. I don't know if he's going to be taking down a Magnadroth by himself, but who comes swooping into, I guess, save the day, but Garm as well. Basically, he sees this Magnadroth tearing through his lines. He takes that personally, and he comes heading over and they basically 2v1 this thing.
I mean, back to the chain thing. I really like that. So this guy looks like he must be a Rune Father because he's got this big pole axe, they describe it as, and Kenji managed to whip his chain around that axe. It was like he doesn't just wrench it away. He's like, this Fire Slayer up on top is too strong for him to pull it away, but he can at least keep keep him from swinging it. So he locks that down and then just keeps chopping at the toe that he had cut off and hacking at exposed nerves and kind of driving the Magmadroth crazy with pain. Mm-hmm. It's like, wow, way to find a solution to your issues here.
Sure.
Like that's
he's got upper management written all over him.
Yeah, pretty creative. Mm-hmm. But yeah, they eventually send it back over the edge, right?
Sure. Yeah. And they even make it a point to be like, all right, well, we got to get ready to face that thing again because those things love swimming in lava. Like this isn't the end of that. But they, essentially dust themselves off with a grin on their face saying, all right, well, let's keep going, essentially.
Think how much glory you get for something that you got to kill twice.
Twice. Yeah. That's
all right. All right.
Yeah.
There's another mention about the reflective sword has gotten through this fine. Kenji's sword is totally wrecked from going into like lava blood. Mm-hmm. So thankfully Vanya had an axe that she's not using anymore. So he snags that up.
Sure.
Yep.
All in a day's work. And then we get to follow them as they proceed to ransack this Dwarden stronghold. No, wrong, incorrect, cut off entirely. Let's fast forward. This was the only cut that I wish we could have gone a little bit farther. Like it was the only cut that I felt was a little premature. I could have done with a little bit more in the scene, but no such luck. And we fast forward yet again to he finds himself stomping around a village not entirely unlike the village that he used to live in, the Kiyoshima. And he is pretty nonplussed, perturbed, not nonplussed. Actually, people use that incorrectly. That's not the right use of that. He's unhappy with the state of things because he and his forces are just lacing through this place, destroying it without hardly even any sort of resistance. That's no way that a Chaos Warrior wants to.
What a waste of my time.
Yeah, right.
Like, so I'm not even bothering calling out to the dark gods because I don't want them to see me doing this. Like it's just embarrassing. Yeah. I like that. I like that characterization.
Sure, it's great. He himself, I mean, he already was pretty decked out in the previous scene, but now he's got a scythe sword that he stole from some vampire or some undead monstrosity. He's
super flossy.
Yeah, he's got the drip is on fleek. I don't know. Nope, I lost the trend.
We're nailing it. We got it.
Perfect.
It's all about confidence. Keep it going.
Yeah, sure. So he is climbing that ladder, that path to glory for sure, and all the more reason why he feels like this is beneath him. And in a similar scene to the way the story opened, he finds himself with a boot on the back of some kid who I think came running out after him after like a cart or something. He was swinging.
Oh yeah, like charged him with like a knife.
Yeah. Well, and I'll put a pin in that because I want to come back to it. So charges him with a knife or a small blade or something. Anyways, and he flips him on his back, boot on his back, and he's all ready to kill him. He's almost beneath his notice, but this is where it's coming. And what should happen again, listeners? If you were paying attention, you will know that Garm rolls up out of nowhere and stays Kenji's blade and says, "No, don't do it." And Kenji's like, "Hold up. What are you talking about? This guy's barely beneath our notice. This means nothing. You can't possibly see in him the things you saw in me, right?" Like so the irony isn't lost on him. He recognizes the scene he finds himself in, which isn't always the case. So it's noteworthy to think that he is not oblivious to what's going on here. He sees the parallels the same as we do. And he goes, no, this is not the same thing. This guy's some punk kid. You can't see anything in him. I'm going to take him out. And I would have thought maybe Garm would have had more to say about this, but he does not. And Garm comes when he sees that he's not getting Kenji to back down. Garm comes swinging with his reflecting blade and cuts Kenji down. And in the midst of this, Kenji is dumbfounded. He says, "How could we fought in hundreds of battles? How could you possibly do this to me?" But to no end, to no avail. He's cut down where he stands, and ostensibly Garm raises the kid back up and thrusts him in a similar situation that Kenji had been. I sort of fast forwarded a little bit there to the end. Davey, did I miss anything, or is there anything you want to add or bring up?
No, that was it. The cycle begins again. Kenji is gone. Like easily
gone.
What was a little unexpected about that for me is that this short story is labeled as a Carvoth's Reavers. Carvoths.
I'm the last person to ask.
Yeah, let me try that again. It's listed as a Kravoth Reavers story, right? So presumably it is something that we may return to. After the first time jumper, so I was like, oh, I think this is just going to be like any book in this series is going to be we're following Kenji around, right? But then as he like advanced so fast over the course of the short story, I was like, no, something else is going on here, and he did. So I was thinking like, oh, maybe it's going to assemble like, here's the magnificent seven of this Kravoth Reavers, and you're going to get a story about each, how they got there. And who knows with Black Library, like we may never see another one of these or something like that. But I'm pretty interested to see how I want to read the next one just to see like how do they link together? Like is Garm the guy we follow? Is Kravoth there? Like how do they link together? Because it's not in the traditional way of follow a character,
Sure. I love the Magnificent Seven deal because we've established in this very episode, I love when people got their own things. I love when there's a group of people who have their own things. But no such luck. Good point about the Kravoth Reavers. I was maybe going to bring it up later, but will they continue? Can they continue? There's no. It's you can get your hopes up when they start giving not epitaphs but subtitles for these things, like the focus. I'm sure the goal when written was maybe there's going to be more, but will there ever be? You can't trust. Sorry, any Black Library people who are listening to this, you can't trust anybody from Black Library. You never know what's going to come up.
It worked for Drecky Flint and the Hollow King.
True.
But will it work for Kravoth?
Sure.
Kravoth.
Fingers crossed. And actually, we didn't even mention who Kravoth Reavers were, but that's like the head honcho above all of this, right? So even Garm has a boss, and it's this Kravoth, Kravoth Demon Struck. And so he's presumably the general over this whole entire thing. But so as far as this ending goes, when it became clear, as soon as the boot was on the back at the end, I'm like, all right, well, I see what, like, okay, I get it. But at that moment, there's still two ways it can go, right? In that it could directly mirror what happened at the beginning of the book, or it could have been, hey, here's the opportunity, here's the off ramp for him to break the cycle, right? An off ramp for him to do something different, for him to recognize in someone else what he saw in himself, and thus he can break the cycle and have a protege or something like that. You could very clearly see that was a possibility. Did you have a prediction as to which way it was going to go, and are you happy with the way that it went?
I'm happy with the way it went because I'm always happy if like some expectations are subverted. The idea of a series that didn't just follow the same character is interesting to me because I like not knowing what to expect. I did think, and it's very, very, very like almost at the very end of the book where of the story where, he's got a boot on somebody's back. I was like, ooh, he is in trouble. Like, I think I see where this is going. So I thought he was going to bite it at that point. And that was also kind of coupled with the, like his he advanced so far in the space of this short story. It's like, it was set up. Yeah, I think at the start I was expecting, okay, we're going to have like kind of the epic journey, and this is like step one in this guy's epic journey. And the fact that the story went a little bit different way than that, or very different way than that, made I enjoyed the surprise factor of it.
I think from my vantage point, sorry, CL Werner, if you're listening to this, through much of the story, I kept thinking, well, what's the in this book? I feel like for these short stories, there's one central like theme that they're trying to get across, or one cool idea. Maybe that's what it is. What's the one cool idea? And seeing a Chaos Warrior become a Chaos Warrior has been done so many times, or enough times anyways. I'm like, well, that can't be it. So either the short story has no cool idea and it's just up, and then he's going to reach the end and that's it, or it's going to be tucked as deep into the end of this story as possible. So I was 2 pages away from the end, and I'm like, it's got to show up. Like, where's it going to be? Like, if there is going to be a thing, it has to hit here pretty quick. And so as soon as the boot landed on his back, I'm like, all right, okay, thank goodness. You averted disaster, Werner. There's the thing. And so I think in that moment where I had reflected on the fact that like it didn't seem as if throughout the story the cool thing had happened yet, like I then was, the expectation was, all right, well, there's probably something in these last 2 pages that is going to throw me for a loop. And then it turns out it did. There was the boot. I saw what was coming. I saw that the two roads diverged in this narrative wood. Which way is it going to go? Now the question is, did I like would I have preferred it to go the other way? Would I have preferred it to have broken the cycle? Maybe, or to put it a different way, I would have preferred to hear Garm give some sort of reasoning behind it. And not that I needed the book to spell it out to me, because I can read between the lines. I get the point. I understand. But there was potential maybe to hear a interesting presentation from Garm's perspective to explain for Kenji's benefit what was happening. But maybe that's a little heavy-handed, though. Maybe the audience doesn't need that. Maybe we don't need to go that route. It could have been interesting without being simple, right? Especially because there was the conversation in the beginning of the book in this language that nobody understood between Garm and the guy who had the first boot. Like, was there some insight there? Some one-liner, some catchy wisdom that needed to be spouted out before he gets dropped? And then do we finally get to learn what it was? But not really. And I was looking forward maybe to the potential of having some chaosy, slaves to darknessy, like insight, wisdom, like something that you don't normally get from bloodthirsty killers, right? Because there's something to Garm. Like, Garm's got something going on, and I wanted to know. I wanted to get in that guy's head a little bit, and we don't necessarily get a chance, which is a shame. Yeah. But then to the point about what could other Reaver stories be about? Well, maybe there could be a Garm story. Maybe how did Garm become who Garm is? Where did he get his sword from? Like, why is he the way he is? That would be interesting to read. Or not to just give it away. I'm just keeping babbling. The last thought is what you could do. An interesting conceit would be, well, what if there was like an antagonist in every one of these stories, and then each subsequent book was how the antagonist got to be the way they were, and so like the next book would be a Sazal book. Like, how did Sazal get to be the way Sazal is? And then there's there's some nasty person in that book, and then the next story is about how that person got real nasty. Like, I'd read that series too. That's for free. I give that one away. So. There's, I think, potential.
We did the hard work. Now just write it.
Just write it. There we go. All right. Do you have any other points or thoughts that you want to bring up about this before we get our standard stuff?
Let's hit the standards.
I love the standards. First things first. Who was your person? Who was your MVP of this story?
It's tough. I think I got to land on Garm, mostly because there is the idea of a bad guy with a philosophy, right? Mm-hmm. Like, he's not just like the villains. If you get a good villain, it makes a story. And so moving forward, I'd be interested to know more about this guy, because he's not just, Skeletor, let's end the world or rule the world or something like that. He has some driving philosophy there. We just get little glimpses of it mostly in his actions, but in that brief thing where he's like, you say that when Kenji says, like, you wrecked my village, you killed all my family and friends. He says, what I did was cut away the weak from the strong. And so you can say that, like, in that moment, he was like, this Kenji is strong. He has potential. And it's my job to, like, give these people with potential a chance. Same with this young guy who charges somebody way outclassing him with a knife. He's like, oh, I like your style. I like your chutzpah. Yeah. And so, for that reason, I got to go with Garm.
Yeah, right on. We didn't talk about this, but something I was thinking about is that, like, we didn't see how Kenji got that boot on his back, essentially. Was this kid braver than Kenji? Did Kenji do something similar, or did he not? This kid's bravery in the face of overwhelming odds or something like that. Presumably, that's something that Garm saw in him. But did Kenji have something similar? Right. It's almost as if the book could have started a couple moments sooner, and then maybe we would have known. But it doesn't call it out. So it makes me wonder if he didn't have something like that. And in some ways, this kid is better than Kenji. To some degree. Secondly, you'd mentioned that you'd use the word villain for Garm, but like, as far as the definition of villain, I see nothing villainous about this dude, with the exception of the things that he does to society at large, as contained in this story. Garm does nothing but save Kenji's life. I think multiple times, right? He dispenses wisdom, like he watches over them. I don't know that I witnessed him kill anybody innocent, so like he checks out.
Garm did nothing wrong.
Garm did nothing wrong. Garm is also my answer. I thought for sure you were going to pick an obscure person, and I thought I was safe in my Garm response. So I echo a lot of the things that you thought. I'll throw out two other points as far as characters go. First, we talked about Vanya the Reaver. I liked her mainly because she was a lady Reaver, but nothing about her character had anything to do with that, right? Like, so it was just taken at face value that there was a female chaos warrior, but her characteristic was not that she's a gal, but she likes loot and stuff, and she wants some treasure, which is a universal character trait. I share that with her. Second character, it's not a character at all, but they reference the Baga Yar, which is apparently a witch at the village in the beginning of the book. Knows or is aware of, or has some relation to the village.
It survived her curses or something.
Yeah, exactly. Who is the Baga Yar? Is she dead or is she still around? And is it a Baba Yaga reference? Presumably, right? Those words are way too close to not.
Yeah, right, exactly.
So, tell me more about this, Werner. So let's circle back.
Yeah,
tell me.
Yeah.
How I find about this witch. So very cool. Did you learn anything about the mortal realms that you didn't know before?
I think it was more just a reinforcing of an idea. It's what we talked about before of like, oh yeah, like this is how the logistics of a Chaos Warband works. Mm-hmm. And then not really a learned thing, but I did like you mentioned Baga Yar, but that came with early on the town of Kyoshima. It mentioned it's dying, and they had survived plague and starvation and the depredations of grot wolf riders and feral ghouls and vile hexes of the witch Baga Yar, and now had been claimed by a catastrophe it couldn't endure. And what I liked about that was it was like we often see these villages that are wrecked or destroyed or overcome by whatever the bad guys are, be they chaos or orcs or whatever the case. But the idea of like, yeah, this town survived a lot of things to get there. And you're like, that makes sense. Because sometimes these villages are cast as like, oh my gosh, like, bad guys. You're like, wow, you live in the Age of Sigmar universe. You live in the more like, this is all the time for you. And so that made the town feel more real to me as a place. Like it helped kind of do the place setting early on. And I appreciated that.
Yeah. Everybody's got their breaking point. And if faced with all of that litany of stuff, like eventually you're gonna fall eventually. Like it's almost inevitable at some point. I forgot about this, but you just talking about Kiyoshima. The dude's name's Kenji. He lives in a place named Kiyoshima. This is obviously have some sort of like Asian influence, and so I thought maybe it was going to have some sort of, I don't know whether it's like a samurai theme or not to be derivative or anything like that. But it just seems as if with these titles, it was going to somehow inform this story to some degree. But I don't know that it did.
It didn't. But here's the thing: like to the same effect of you appreciating that there was a female Reaver who the female part was not like central, like it was like she just was there. Mm-hmm. Same thing here.
Yeah,
like,
true.
Some other representation, and it wasn't like, hey, look, this is a caricature of this, or this is like it just is.
Yeah. Good.
So.
Very good point, right? So I take that to heart, I suppose, is maybe one, but very neat. I don't know that I learned much about the Mortal Realms really either. Do we have any recommendations for other stories, though? Other Black Library stories that folks might want to read to get their fix after learning about this one?
Yeah, a favorite of mine, and it was kind of I was reminded of it. I think it was Lord Arcanum Elizabeth, maybe in our Discord, had mentioned that she had just read this recently and really liked it. Scourge of Fate by Robbie McNiven.
Good one.
I really like that one a lot. And that is from the perspective of chaos. There was another one, if you want to talk about the arc of somebody who is perhaps on the way to chaos, is Path to Glory by, I want to say, Evan Dickin.
Yep, correct.
That's another short story, which
novella actually, but so a little longer than a short story.
Yep. But we covered that in a previous episode. But that's worth a read or a listen if this was kind of your jam.
Sure, and that's nice.
Your jam.
Well, the whole conceit's a little bit of a spoiler, so I won't get into it. And then just as a final one, I had read Blood of the Flayer by Richard Strachan, which is another good one. It's a progress of power from a chaos champion. It's a little chaos god focusy, but like it covers some ground, and I think it had some similar beats and vibes to this short story as well. So check that one out too. All right. Any other final parting thoughts before we get into what we thought of it entirely?
Let's do it.
All right. Right on. Hey, Davy, what'd you think of Reflections in Steel?
I actually ended up liking it more after talking about it with you than when I was reading it.
Me too. Keep going.
Yeah. Specifically, I really like the idea of I'm looking forward to like another one in this series. Like that's my takeaway. I would love. I mean, it doesn't. We talk all the time about how we like short stories here. This would be a great short story series. I think. Like let's get these different vignettes from, because this is a huge horde. This Kravots, Reavers, or whatever. Tell me more about like what that looks like. How did that go to? What are all the different people like in there? Give me their stories, and I won't know what to expect each time, because like in the first one, the presumable main character died. So I think I was originally going to go 5, but instead I'm going to go 6 out of 8 links of chain holding your manacles together.
Okay, good. Right on. I should have thought of a rating system. I didn't. I agree completely. I was talking before about how I was thinking like, man, if there's no point to it, or if there's no like one cool thing about this short story before I get to the end of it, I'm going to be pretty, if it didn't happen, I was going to be disappointed, right? Like, I understand that honestly, just the trajectory of a cast where it can be interesting to some people, but that is not enough for me. I was hoping there were going to be some central thrust, some nail in the coffin at the end that would like really drive a point home. Fortunately, it came, so thank goodness. But for much of it, it wasn't there, and I found myself pausing, thinking, "Oh, I don't need to see what do they call bolter porn," which I don't know much about, but it felt like this was a little bit of this. It's fighting Fire Slayers, fighting Skaven, like that. I don't need to see these fights over and over again. Slaves of Darkness verse insert thing here that comes up a lot. Like it wasn't as new to me as I needed it to be. All I have to say, the book wasn't that. It ended up having a good point at the end, so I'm glad to hear it. And like you said, talking more about it makes me enjoy it all the more. You picked up on things that I hadn't picked up through my initial reading, and so we're broken records about how we like short stories, because we're talking about that all the time. And I think we're, to some degree, we're getting to be broken records about, oh, hey, I liked this thing after I talked about it more with somebody. I feel like I feel that way almost every time. If ever I'm down on something, I just need to crack it open with some folks.
Sometimes our listeners just need the familiar. Like we're a comforting, predictable blanket for them to wrap around themselves.
You're not wrong. As an aside, Huey now is obsessed with blankets. He just turned 1. We're not allowed to like put pillows and blankets in his crib now. And now he's like, oh my God, have you guys ever seen blankets before? And he'll sit there and roll and wrap himself up. And then probably, if we're not there, probably strangle himself. The whole reason why you don't give him a blanket. Because he just giggles with glee when you give him a blanket. It's absurd.
Wow. That's fun.
Yeah. Anyways, so I did enjoy it more, and touching on the fact that I would love little insights to this growing. It's such a great pitch or a great idea for a series of short stories. Is there's this horde is probably boundless, right? There's probably an infinite number of stories baked into what can be done in this army, and I want to read more of them. And like you said, you never know what will happen. The main characters can die. Maybe main characters always will die. Maybe that's the whole point. So that's cool too. But as far as ratings go, 6 to 8 feels about right. 6 to 8 points on the chaos symbol they pointed thing. You guys know. You guys want to know about Sigmar. Yeah. So I'm right there with you. Very cool. Any final things before we go?
No, good pick.
All right, let's do it. It's time for our reforging. Chat with us anytime about your thoughts on Twitter at The Mortal Realms. Davey, where can they find you online?
I'm at red_Zeke or at WTHcast if you want to talk Underworlds.
Excellent. I'm Aaron. You can find me at Dos Asos on Twitter, and obviously the Story Phase if you're into that sort of thing. And you can find all our Mortal Realms shows and content and a bunch of more written What the Hex content at www.themortalrealms.com.
Yep.
Such a great thing.